Good evening and welcome to the February 5th meeting of the Long Meadow Select Board. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Well, we're all here. I guess we can start with announcements. I don't know if there's any announcements you have.
I have a couple.
Okay.
If nobody else does. Just as a heads up, on February 9th, which I believe is Friday, the library will be closed for a professional development date. So they'll be working, but they'll be closed to the public for professional development for library staff. So just make sure you make a note of the fact that on Friday the doors won't be open.
Okay.
And just late this afternoon, our new fire engine, Engine 2, arrived from the dealership. I just was lucky I happened to be standing there when it came in the driveway, and it's really a beautiful apparatus. The lighting that they put on the things has affected a light tower and lit up the whole parking lot. So it's so I know the fire department. On behalf of the fire department, I know they feel very grateful to the residents of Long Meadow for allowing them to purchase that equipment and upgrade their department. And that Engine 2, as the board knows, is our primary rescue engine, and the one we had, which used to do most of the accident scenes, had the jaws of life on it.
Right. Yeah.
Had to be taken off service because it failed. So this new piece of equipment will be latest and greatest technology, and will be in service hopefully early next week.
Great. And the one that failed was 25 years old.
Yes.
Not too many people get a car to last 25 years.
No.
That's for sure. So,
No. And if you ever drove behind Engine 2, you knew that it wasn't long for this world. But no, we were able to get that approved, I think, last fall, and it's like I said, a beautiful piece of machinery, and will help make the fire department more efficient and more responsive.
Okay. Any other announcements? Okay, then we'll move on to resident comments if we have any this evening. Okay, then we'll move on to select board comments. I don't know if anybody, Marie? Yeah.
At the municipal association that we attended, we all
Yeah.
come back with great ideas. And one of the things that I attended was on
We hear things.
preparation for climate change. But what was fascinating is there's a program out there that Governor Baker's put in after executive order, I don't know what it was, 69, that said that if communities put together municipal vulnerability plans, then they can access money through the state to do things like, we have our pump station that's in the floodplain. We can get money, access to that to do some of the things that are in our capital plan for the pump station. We can bring records up from the basement that we've had flooded a few times in town hall already. And so I brought this back and mentioned it to the Energy Task Force as well as to the town manager, and the town manager has already spoken to Pioneer Valley Planning Commission about what the program's like. But as we get more information, I'd like to bring it to the board, because I'd like the board to, look at it and endorse it, because I think it's a really good plan, and it's not going to be a difficult job for us, because we already have done the emergency management plan, and what you do is it's built on that, and all of the departments already have this information, so all they have to do is to put that on top of the emergency management plan, this extra layer, and then we will have we'll be able to get a municipal vulnerability plan, and then it's almost like Complete Streets. There's a little bit of training, and then we can start funneling projects for funding through the money that is available through the state. So it's really a great idea.
Good. And you've already recognized some areas where you could be vulnerable, especially in the floodplain. So, now, we have some folks who might need help with being able to hear what we're saying, and I know that there's some mechanisms for that. Who would
Those
be able
are
to set that
back
up?
there.
Should be in the
They're back there.
They're in the-
Yeah, behind Rose.
Okay, I can take a look at them. If you want to make your
Yeah, it's a quick announcement. I just want to mark the unfortunate death of Herbert Friedman. Herb served the town of Longmeadow for well over a decade, I think almost 2 decades, as the water commissioner. And I just thought it was worth noting his passing.
I think they're in the drawer, Tom.
Yeah. Tom, try the drawer. What?
Is that Kurt's father?
Yeah.
Didn't know about, didn't get any correspondence, he just passed away?
Last Thursday or something like that. So. Okay. Well, the microphone's not for the room. So,
All right, I will listen to the minute, to get what you said. I apologize for not being able to hear that. Well, I have a comment. As you know, we had our special town meeting it seemed like last week, I guess the week before that. And, democracy is all about participation. I mean, it's the roots of, the way things work right in a democratic society. And, when you're debating with an issue that has to do with personal preference, it's different because some people think their preference is the town should go in this direction. Some people say the town should go in that direction. And it's really hard to convince people what's the best way to go. And sometimes there isn't really a best way. And that's why getting 1,200 people to show up at a town meeting on a February night, January 25th, it says that, people do care about the issues and care about the future of this town. And unfortunately, there were two sides. Not both people could walk away as winners in this, but, I think we can feel good that both sides did their best to present their point of view and why it was important for us to think about the direction the town is going. And I know last night a lot of people watched a difficult football game, but losing in a situation where it comes down to the final seconds and you could have won, is kind of, you aren't really losing. And I think that, when you get 12,000 people show up to the select board, the whole town really did win by having people show up to take it seriously, to show their concern. And I know that there was some, concerns about the town manager's role in that. And, we have a executive meeting at the end of this meeting today, and we're going to talk about, we had two people on the select board look into allegations and review any emails and so forth that were called into question. And, but I think that, we, it was nice to, even though I know the town manager, people were critical of him, I mean, it was nice to see at the end of the town meeting, people would come up to him and say, we appreciate the work you're doing, Stephen. We know that you're trying to do what's best for the town, and that obviously has been a burden, that property, since you came here years ago. And so now, hopefully, it'll go smoothly, and you won't have anything else to do with it. But it was quite a adventure to be part of as a chair of the select board, to see the town mobilize and really, look at this issue and do the best job they could in terms of making a decision, and had a lot of people participate. So I thank all the people who were involved for being civil, and I hope that after this is over, we all can get along, because that's the main thing. We want to enjoy where we live, and that's all I have to say about that. Marie?
I think now that you brought it up, I'd like
Okay.
to add two things to that. And one is that there was some miscommunications out there, and belief that there was a grand plan that the select board had been working on with the town manager to change all the properties around. They called it an overlay plan. And as long as I've been on the select board, that has never been true. I think there's, everyone, as the select board members have come and gone, I've seen a commitment to the green and the importance of the historic properties in town. And then in regards to, I didn't mention it at town meeting because I felt we should stay on the topic, but when it came to what the job of the town manager was during this whole process, the job was to get anyone who comes in front of the town, when they want to do a citizen's petition, get them through that process and what that process is, and to help them step by step. But at no point in time is the town manager or the select board have any power or control over getting that. It's our job to get it in front of the legislative branch because we are the executive branch. And the town manager did what he was supposed to do, which was get it to the various boards and get it in front of the town. And while I'm seeing that our town moderator is here, I think it behooves us to thank her for helping us get through that process through the forum, as well as I think it's the biggest town meeting that I have seen so far. And it went very smoothly, and everyone had a chance to speak, and both sides were able to express their feelings. And I think as people left, they felt that they did have the chance to express. And I know that is a very difficult thing to do when you have 1,200 people there in very uncomfortable situations. And it really, those aren't comfortable bleachers, the people who ended up in the bleachers. So I want to thank the town employees as well as the town moderator and your staff that was there that was able to pull that off that night. So I want to thank you very much.
All right. So we will move on to our...
I'll have
Yeah.
comments, but I'm going to do them later.
You'll do them later?
Yeah.
Okay. So we will move on to, we have some board appointments. We have 3 folks here. And if I can call up our first candidate, Tessie Plankley, if you're here.
Did you see the note?
Oh, yeah.
She'll
Oh,
be here by 8 or so.
oh, she,
Sharon, you didn't see the note?
I didn't see any paperwork here.
On the bottom of it.
On the bottom of, oh,
Well, anyway,
Did
Tessie will be
No,
here
no.
at 8:30.
I'm sorry, I didn't get any. If it was a recent.
Library till 8.
Okay, so she's at the library.
Day job's getting in the way.
Okay. And then,
You just do it.
but I see Melinda Cropsey here. If you could step up, Melinda, and just, we need a long introduction, but tell us a little bit about why you're interested in the committee and...
Thank you for inviting me this evening. I submitted my application back in October, but wasn't able to attend your interviews
Oh.
in November. So anyway, I'm grateful for the opportunity to come before you and request a spot on the Historic District Commission. I did serve on the Historic District Commission for several years in the early, mid-'90s. I haven't gone back and checked my calendars, but, and I too, want to thank you all for, being able to participate in the process, and that was the town meeting. I think I think you probably know where I was coming from. I felt really privileged to be a part of the process and to participate. And one of the things that was unsettling to me a little bit about was how much confusion there was in town about the roles of the Historical Commission, the Historic District Commission, and the Historical Society. And in the past, having lived in the Historic District for 24 years now, in the past, the Historic District Commission did play a pretty active role in educating, especially the residents, about the responsibilities of that homeowners assume when they purchase homes in the district, and I think that's a really important role that's kind of slipped. And so I'd like to become actively involved in educating people that live in the district as well as people that live in the community at large, so that they have an understanding and a respect for what it is that people that live in the district do to keep it the way it is, and to ensure that we preserve that heart of the town that we all care so much about. So I think that's why I'm back again, because I feel like there's a role that I can play there, and I look forward to doing that as we move forward, because I think really the most resounding and wonderful thing about the town meeting was the fact that we were all there because we genuinely do care so much about this community and want to see it continue to thrive and represent our values.
Right.
So,
And I know you've been involved with the schools and with
Oh, my gosh.
keeping the gardens going, and I'm really glad that you're, stepping forward to volunteer to continue to be part of the town. The volunteers, because the town runs on volunteers, and we appreciate you stepping forward. Any? Yes, Marie.
sure.
I'm very excited you're stepping back into the historic district. There's something that I'm always fascinated and would like them to get more involved with. And since you're a gardener, you'd appreciate this, and that's the historic nature of the green itself. Because a lot of times we're planting trees or things are being done to the green. It'd be nice if the historic district had a little say in what's going into the green and maybe some long-range plan on where we want the green to eventually grow into.
Yeah.
And some maybe take what used to be historically, though it was a sheep pasture, maybe not the sheep pasture, but something that goes into the period of time. And now that we are also going to be working on the road, I'd like us to talk a little more about streetscaping. So maybe bring the historic district in and showing some of the possibilities of what we might do.
Well, Historic District has an important role to play vis-à-vis that revisiting the safety around the green. So that's
Yeah, because there's all different ways of putting in crosswalks. I've seen the brick ones.
Right,
When we
right.
were at the association again, they were all sorts of availability of what I didn't even know was out there. So I'd be interested to see what the historic district, gets involved with that too. So thank you for joining in.
yeah. Thank you for having me.
No questions?
Any comments? Yeah, because I know Storatown, they do a nice job with some of the things they grow there, like broom corn and stuff like that. I would go for sheep, but okay. So,
I'm a fan of the sheep myself, so we'll see what
thank
we
you,
can.
Melinda.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch. We'll make our decision. And then we also have Tim McKenna, who is trying to get on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Please have a seat and you could introduce yourself and your address.
Hi. Tim McKenna, 197 Farmington Road. And I think most of you know me from my stint on the Historic District Commission and also the Historic Commission. Let's see, I moved here when I was 6 months old. And my parents, we lived at 231 Park Drive and went to Long Meadow Public Schools until halfway through high school. And, then I've always lived in Massachusetts, lived in Boston for 30 years, then moved back here with my family. And we've been here now for almost 10 years on Farmington Road. And it's funny, I've never really looked into the Zoning Board of Appeals. So until I was in Town Hall a couple of weeks ago and noticed that there was an opening. And I am a registered architect in the Commonwealth. I've got a lot of experience in urban planning, town planning, but never really at this sort of level of detail. So I'd be very interested in lending whatever expertise you can, that I can lend to the process and to understanding of the various things that come up before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I understand this is an alternate position as well, so I'm not sure if that is, I don't think that's a voting position. I'm not sure. That was one piece of clarification.
This says a 3-year associate term
It's a real.
expiring until 6/30, so you'll be voting.
It's the whole thing.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a 3-year term, yeah.
So, but I wasn't sure what the difference is between an associate and a regular member, so.
Oh, Yeah,
But,
yeah, I don't know if someone could,
But we didn't
No,
know
there's-
that's in the office.
there's no-
It didn't specify that.
yeah,
There's no difference in terms of your voting ability.
okay. All right,
it's just the difference between the terms, because I think this was only a 3-year term.
No, I think
Okay.
of all three of them.
do you have any questions for Tim, Marie?
You've been really a hard worker in all those committees,
Yeah.
so thank you for stepping up again.
Sure.
And the bad news is, I think there might be a lot of things happening with the zoning, which is, I'm glad you're coming on. I know we've talked about looking at updating some of the zoning, and they're also making some changes out of Boston. So it'll be important to have someone who has the experience of town planning and history in Long Meadow to be on the board. So thank you for joining.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Looking forward to it.
Yeah,
I know that, for example, for assessors, there's some special training that's required. Isn't there special training for the ZBA? Do you know? Does anybody know if there's? Tim, you haven't heard that there's any?
I haven't, no, I was just in there a couple of weeks ago, and
Okay, I don't know that there is. I just thought that it was, it's got a lot of specialization in terms of knowing our zoning laws.
Mhm.
So.
so I didn't have to bone up on that and
You
learn a lot.
99.99% of the rest of the people.
I mean, a lot of it is reading the zoning bylaws and making interpretations. There's a lot of OJT with the zoning boards are pretty
Yeah.
experienced and highly functional regulatory body here in the town. So I have no doubt that they'll bring you along.
Because that was the other thing, too, that I really was impressed with the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals at the town meeting. I thought he did a fantastic job and looked like somebody I'd like to, frankly, learn a lot from and just be a part of the process. I mean, I have been members of the Historic Commission and the Historic District Commission, but to be honest with you, I really kind of felt that, much as I loved being a member on that I really wanted to get more involved in something that really, frankly, had, for lack of a better term, really kind of had teeth in it, and really something where I could really have some direct input into the future of the town.
I noticed with your involvement with the facilities design, your actual primary profession, have you ever considered getting on capital planning and some of the other committees?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, that's definitely another thing that I do spend a lot of time. My job, so I am a registered architect, but for the past 10 years, actually past 15 years of my career, I've specialized as an owner's project manager.
Mhm.
So my major focus has been on healthcare, helping health organizations and hospitals do planning of major capital projects. I'm just finished up a stint for a couple of years down at Yale New Haven Hospital. And really my focus has been on keeping projects on track in terms of budget and schedule, and making sure that the kind of loose term is scope creep, that we really kind of get what we paid for and don't really kind of go beyond what we've paid for. So that's another thing that perhaps somewhere down the road I'd definitely consider.
Thank you.
All right, Tim. And I think the experience of living in Boston and then coming here, you've seen all the experimenting they've done with zoning out there.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
a good, that's
Well,
good for me.
it does. It's, because I really, we're a residential community, and I'm very, very keen on making sure that we maintain the proper character of the town, while also making sure that we address, changes that are just necessary. I mean, we were just talking about it just now, where, the green was sheep, for grazing sheep.
All right.
So not too many opportunities for that these days. So, the town really kind of has to move along and address needs as they come up.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
And we'll be letting you know, I guess we have two more in the meeting after this one, right? Next meeting. So.
All right. Great.
Okay,
Thanks very
thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, all right. And now we have a few things. I guess the town manager's report would be next.
So we have a lot of company
There's some
here. I
company,
can defer to, if you want
We defer to our, let's see, should we look at our, like the tax report? Cheryl's here, right? Should we?
to. I was going to say, just start with the moderator.
Oh, the moderator? Oh, okay, yeah. She's, the moderator's not as nervous as Cheryl.
All the more reason, Tom, all the more reason to make her wait.
I'd rather if you want to come up and do it now, yeah. This is a favorite part of your job. No, you're getting used to this.
It is, sort of. Third time, it's a charm. I'm Cheryl Kudnick. I'm the treasurer collector, and I'm here to submit the quarterly report for October through December 2017. Once again, as per investment policy, the town held no long-term investments that exceeded the 5 years. Individual bank balances are under $5 million, and all banks received the highest safety return of green from Bearer Bank, and all accounts are fully insured and secured. We had a band mature in November in the amount of $973,105. We renewed the band in the amount of $1,148,630 at a rate of 1.35% with People's Bank. There were paydowns on the band in the amount of $100,000 to the high school, $163,900 for general funds, $29,000 for water, $229,750 for sewer funds. There were also additions to the ban, $510,900 for the fire truck, $187,275 for water at Branch Street. The ban matures on May 30th, 2018, to match the renewal date of a $2.6 million ban borrowed to purchase the DPW site. We had several CDs mature in October. There was a stabilization CD that matured with Westfield Savings Bank at a rate of 1.2% in the amount of $248,283,000. We renewed this stabilization CD at 1 year with Country Bank at 1.5%. We had another CD of general fund money with Country Bank in the amount of $243,993 mature at a rate of 1.1%, and we renewed the CD with Country Bank at 1.5%. There was a general fund CD maturing with East Boston Savings Bank at a rate of 1.25%, and that was for $1,518,914, and we moved this to a money market account that pays a rate of 1.35% with East Boston Savings Bank, maintaining liquidity if needed for funding. There was also a CD that matured with East Boston Savings. It was a stabilization account at a rate of 1.26% for $253,354, and we opened a new one-year stabilization account with Adams Community Savings Bank at a rate of 1.55%. I was able to transfer $2.2 million from our general fund account money that was only paying 0.76%, and I moved that to the MMDT account, which at the time was paying 1.37%, and today is paying 1.55%. The net increase of $4,479,690 this quarter was mainly from the result of the FY 2018 third and fourth quarter taxes being paid before the December 31st, 2017 date in anticipation of the tax law changes. About $3 million was collected. That is $2.67 million more normal than what we usually get. We usually get about, it was $2.6 million more than we usually get for early payments. Our general fund investments for December for FY 2018 were $52,031. This is an increase of 43% compared to our December FY 2017 investments of $36,542. As a treasurer, I continue to find the best possible interest rates, fund the accounts payable and the payroll accounts with that banks are earning the lowest rates first, and I continue to monitor and move funds to achieve the highest yield when possible and continue to practice safety and liquidity.
Okay, sounds good. Ed, do we have any questions on this report? Yes, Mark.
Yeah, Cheryl, I don't know if this question's right for you or maybe Paul or the both of you to go after it, but I've been on the board for a while, and shortly after I got here, we started playing the low-interest, short-term bond anticipation note game rather than long-term bonds. With the rising interest rates that I see, although 1.7 something % still is pretty good for bond anticipation note, do you see any potential change in the market that we may stop looking after these short bond anticipation notes and have to go back to the old traditional system of just bonding things when bonds are approved?
I'd say it's something that we have to monitor, and once those short-term rates get a little bit higher, because I think it's still to our advantage right now with these smaller projects that are only going out 2 and 3 years, just to roll over the bands, because as you know, if we do the traditional bonding,
there's an issue cost that's
right. There's usually a $20,000 to $30,000 issuance cost. So I think we have a little ways to go with those short-term rates before we start really looking at those, changing them into a tradition.
So you don't have any you're just kind of playing it by ear.
You just watch the rates.
Okay.
I can't tell you when they're going to hit 2 and 3% for a short-term rate. So it's something we just monitor in that regard.
Are we equipped to respond fast enough to do that? And that's not you, it's really more the select board, because to go out for a bond, it's more than just that. Bond anticipation notes are pretty quick to do.
Well, bond anticipation notes are almost overnight.
Yep.
For the most part. To do a traditional bond, we're maybe 45, 60 days.
Okay.
So it's not that long of a time frame that we couldn't jump on it if we see those rates skyrocket, but start moving above the the target rates.
Paul, I was just wondering, so if we bonded something like a new senior center, what would be the percentage rate we could get on something like that?
Around 4%. 4% for a 20-year bond. is
4%.
What we just quoted from our financial advisor, because he was, I asked him about, because we were actually looking at numbers to put in for the DPW. So I asked him to give us a rate that if we went out to bond in late spring, early summer, for a 20-year note, it'd be about 4%.
4%, okay, great, thanks. Marie?
I know that we have that rule where you cannot have more than 5 million.
Yep.
And some of we're getting very little, like 0.25, and others we're getting 1.25. And is this costing us a lot of money, or?
No, we don't pay any fees with the banks.
No, I'm talking about we don't get as much in our interest rates because we're sitting in a lot of these smaller banks.
Right, I keep most of the money in the higher interest rates. Those are my low accounts that, the ones that you're seeing, is you referring to like school lunch and the gate
No, I was looking
receipt?
at East Hampton Claims Trust at 0.32.
Those I'm considering moving now because the rates are increasing, that I'm out looking to move those monies to different accounts because the rates are low.
Okay.
And they're coming up so quickly, I'm going to make a decision tomorrow.
Okay, so most of those you are just moving them over, it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
when there's smaller amounts.
Right,
That
exactly.
we're stuck in the
Yep.
0.25s
Yep.
and things like that. Okay, and like the school ones,
Mm-hmm.
some of those, we have to have different
I have to have different funds for each one.
different funds for each one, but if
Yep.
you sort of added up the school lunch and gate receipts, do we have to have them in different accounts, or do we just have to have it unbalanced? in
School lunch I
different-
need separate. Gate receipts it's general fund, but school lunch I have to balance to something with that. The gate receipt, the ambulance, those I kind of keep as low as I can. But the money comes in, it keeps coming in, and so every couple of weeks I look at it and move it out.
Okay, so it's shifted
It's
out,
shifting,
because
yep.
it's like, that's a 0.11.
I was going to add, a lot of those accounts are done with local banks for convenience purposes. Because the school personnel or whomever are making deposits, sometimes
Gate receipts,
directly
yeah.
with gate receipts, where there's a late night basketball game, that might be deposited, later on a Friday night or early on a Saturday morning. So that's why there's some with the local banks that aren't quite earning a high interest rate. They're set up for low, or they're set up for convenience, and the money's just monitored after that.
And I noticed you don't have, not, like there's, some of our other local banks aren't even there, but do you keep looking and checking new banks?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Right. I'm always out there looking. Like Adams Savings, Adams Community, they came in with one of the highest rates, and they're out in Adams.
And Berkshire's not here, you've been keeping your eye on
Yep.
Berkshire?
Yeah, a lot of times when they're if they're not FDIC, DIF, they have to collateralize them, and you lose a rate within the collateralization.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Good,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh,
Oh, I had a question.
more.
Well,
Sure.
you could- I was just-
Sure.
Oh.
See that last?
You know, she didn't have to back up, Paul.
Yeah, I think we talked a couple meetings ago about the investment strategies and other communities are using. Is there any a simulation of what other communities are doing across the Commonwealth?
I think you might find some communities have probably a higher risk tolerance than our investment policy allows for, that they potentially are out there investing in maybe commercial paper. They might even have bonds. There are certain things that are allowed by the statutes that do allow you to go a little bit further than, most of our stuff is in CDs. But there are some more, I don't want to say risky, but there are some more things that would we'd have a higher rate of return, but at the same time, we're also subject to potentially losing principal. And one of the main things that investment policy does that we currently have and what we go on is that we have all our principal is protected. So that's one of the main reasons. There are other strategies out there. It's just a matter of risk tolerance. We used to have money with an investment advisor years ago where we did have some bonds, I believe, and I think it was GE bonds that we held. We basically liquidated all that money with that investment advisor. They do take their fee out of there. So when the rates are not that high, when they take out a certain percentage, it's a lot easier to make the money locally. But, I mean, we could loosen it up, but we are subject to the, I don't want to say the market, because today was such a horrendous day in the market, but we'd be we'd be more subject or susceptible to market conditions.
But is there any sort of consensus across the Commonwealth, or is everybody just kind of?
I'll
Do their own
ask
thing.
Cheryl if you're aware of what your counterparts do.
Not really much is said about it. There's people asking about investment policies, but nobody really says.
Yeah, because there's 350-some communities. You would think there'd be some kind of strategy that they're using or combining together with the strategies.
Best practices.
Yeah, I mean, it seems odd that individual enclaves would be doing their things without.
Oh,
You just
use
described
yeah.
just about everything that happens, though, in municipalities in the state. I mean,
Yeah.
I think some of that stuff, some of that is Massachusetts is big into local control.
Right.
And so I'm sure there's an element of, you're not going to tell us what to do with our money. I mean, local volunteer boards and committees, I believe, were influential in some of that decision-making. So, I mean, local, like Long Meadow residents.
Mhm.
So a lot of that was residents deciding for themselves what happens with their money. So I have to imagine that's a part of it.
We all attended, almost everyone, I think, the OPEB lecture at the association, and they were talking about it, taking an OPEB trust and putting some of that in the investment vehicle. Will you need a new policy written to be able to do
We
something
might need
like
an
that?
amendment to the policy. I believe there's a certain section of that policy that deals with trust funds. So we would just need an amendment to the policy. And it's my goal is to actually, once we get all the trust fund paperwork in place, we do have a couple things to do, is probably to move that money with the state retirement system and let them do the investing for us. And we could set up the risk tolerance that, we would be subject to, whether it's, high risk or something more moderate. But we would probably turn the money over to them, or because that's more of a long-term, it's not a day-to-day money requirement. We're investing long-term. So in that regard, the stock market is a little bit easier to get into, because you're in there for the longer term. But that's something that we hope to probably accomplish over the spring, is to get that money in the hands of a professional advisor.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. All right, so we can move on to our town moderator, Rebecca Townsend, if you can. We're doing a follow-up on our town meeting.
Thank you for being willing to meet with me today. I wanted to first offer my appreciation to the many voters who showed up to participate at town meeting, to the volunteers and department heads and departments employees who worked to put this together. I know it's not easy. I also wanted to offer some reflections on a couple of things that I thought perhaps could be improved, get your feedback on them, and request feedback from you as well as any voters who are listening. With regard to the process for parking, check-in, the location, and the ballot, those are my primary concerns. With parking, I noticed that there were a lot of people who came in late, and I learned later that there were people who had trouble finding parking spots. Some reported driving for 45 minutes to find a spot, ultimately not finding one in the lot. And I was curious if the police department or DPW could somehow be involved in whether it's putting up a lot is full sign when the lot does get full, or otherwise directing traffic just to ensure the smooth flow for when we anticipate large meetings like that one. The other is related to the process for check-in. Anytime we have a large number of people coming all at once, it is a difficult process, and the clerk and assistant clerk and I have been working carefully on trying to manage that. The clerk did experiment with the polling pads for the meeting prior to this one. You might remember where you could either say your name and address and it would populate on the polling pad, or you could show your state driver's license and it would speed the process along. You didn't have to know your precinct. The clerk feels very strongly that those polling pads are beneficial at speeding things up. That's something that the board may want to look at in the future. I did hear somebody make a suggestion about the use of thumbprints on a phone app, and I just wanted to offer my quick feedback on that would probably not be permissible under Massachusetts general law. We don't have a requirement to show ID when we vote, and let alone a thumbprint would be an incredibly intrusive method of surveilling people's movements. So I would not be in favor of that, and I don't think we're even permitted. With the issue of the location, I know the gym is not as comfortable as other locations. We have the hard seats. I know it's difficult for people to sit on them for a long time. However, it is the location that offers the largest number of seating for everybody when we do have those large meetings. And I've done a summary of our last attendance in the last several years, and we are at the 600 to 700 level. And so if we're at that average number, it makes sense to be in the gymnasium where people can see easily. They have an easier time hearing. They have an easier time, most importantly, being able to get up and go to speak when they need to speak. And so as uncomfortable as the gymnasium can be for those larger meetings, when we anticipate anything more than 300 people, the gymnasium is my general preference. And if we're anticipating a meeting that has a large number of people, we need to have a sound system in place that can easily move from transmitting from the gymnasium out to the auditorium or the cafeteria, and ideally both. There should be a sound system and audio-visual system to allow people to use an overflow room in some comfort. And finally, the issue of the ballots. There were some who had asked, why do we need to do this? The process seems to take a long time. I would take some sort of comfort in knowing that with a 32 vote margin of 1,238 people voting, that going to a ballot was the right move, and the meeting made the right decision in going for a ballot. If we had had a visual assessment count first, I may have doubted my call. I probably would have. I would not have been comfortable doing that. Or 7 people would have easily jumped up to doubt the call, and then we would go to a hand count. When you go from first count to the second count, and even when you're in the hand count, people can change their minds. They see somebody else standing up a certain way or holding their card a certain way, and they change their mind. With a ballot, we have the vote that's accurate the first time, the right time, the accurate count the first time, and that is really important. The one thing I would change for balloting in the future is the pathway that people walked in. We did not anticipate that so many people would want to evacuate right after voting, and so one of the counters had made a suggestion to me about having the process work a little bit differently so that the pathway would be clearer, easier, and no paths would cross. And so I would be interested in doing that for next time. That said, I welcome your feedback and look forward to your reflections on it as well.
Okay, I think we'll start with Richard. I know, you don't have anything to say? No, I thought you were going to talk about the voting. All right, then Marie.
You said something interesting, that the polling pads were helpful. Does she need more of those?
Well, that was just an experimental time. We don't actually own them. I believe we were leasing them. I'm not sure, Stephen, if you know that.
You only had them that one time.
I think it was
for
a demo.
It was a
It
demonstration
was a demo.
time.
Yeah. So it might be something you're recommending we invest in?
I know that the clerk was very pleased with how they worked. I wasn't there, staffing the check-in, but I'm relaying that comment to her from her here. And from my point of view, anything that can speed people's check-in process is worthwhile.
And also you mentioned audio. So in other words, if we did have the overflow to
Yes.
the auditorium, we didn't have the necessary equipment?
I was talking with the staffer about that, and he said, well, we have a backup to the backup to the backup. Things weren't working as smoothly as it should have.
Because if we did automatically set up for the overflow, then some of the people who really physically can't stay on the bleachers, because some people it's just
No, it's-
impossible,
yeah.
would be able to flow into the auditorium and sit in the more comfortable seats.
Correct.
All right, so that, again, is an investment that we should be looking to maybe make in the budget.
It's something that the board should consider. I understand that the way the high school was designed so that audio could flow from the auditorium to the gymnasium and to the cafeteria. However, with a town meeting, you want to have the most people in the largest room.
Yes.
You don't want to be broadcasting from a small area out to a larger area. That's less wieldy and less comfortable for participants to be able to get to the main speaking room.
But you're saying it can be done. It can go from the gymnasium to the auditorium, because the auditorium is smaller than the gymnasium.
It can go from the auditorium to the gymnasium, I believe. That's what I've been told.
Oh,
So
but it cannot go from the,
it can't go easily from the gymnasium
okay.
out.
So we need to get new equipment or look to see what needs to be done to be able to
It's something
have
that
the
should be
overflow.
investigated.
Okay. Is there anything else in the way of equipment or something that you feel needs to be invested in?
In terms, I don't know whether this is something that we have a need for. However, I had asked the Rules Committee to research the use of electronic voting pads, which are, small cards where people would press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Some towns use them with open town meetings. Some towns will lease them. Some towns own them. I don't know whether it's a worthwhile investment or not. And that's why I'd asked the Rules Committee to do some research on it to see what people and towns say.
Then you don't have to count. It cuts out all the counting time, right?
Again, some for those that do the hand count, yes.
And I guess for people in the bleachers, someone wants to do a fundraiser, they could sell little cushions as
Oh.
people go in. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. Other questions? Okay.
I just have one thing on the parking, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I think when we had the vote for the new high school, we actually used shuttles
Oh, okay.
that people would park. They parked at Williams Middle School, and there was a shuttle that ran from Williams Middle School to the high school. We were nice enough to get the Council on Aging van. I don't think it was well utilized, but it's something that we could look at in the future to run that same type of shuttle, either from Blueberry Hill or
Yeah.
from Williams, whichever might have the bigger parking lot.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, do we want to go to the building committee presentation next, and then we'll deal with the minutes later? All right.
Is the remote? So, yeah, I can help.
Good evening. My name is Mary Beth Bergeron. I live at 497 Inverness Lane, and I am the chairman of the Permanent Building Committee for the town of Long Meadow. I'm going to preface the presentation with an extremely brief history of what's happened since this committee was appointed, so with your permission,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
At the May of 2017 town meeting, the voters of Long Meadow approved an appropriation of $250,000 for the planning and design of a new adult center at Greenwood Park, based on the Select Board's Adult Center Building Committee recommending Greenwood Park as the preferred site for a new adult center. In June of 2017, the Select Board elected to disband the Adult Center Building Committee and to form a new advisory committee called the Permanent Town Building Committee. Included in the charge to this committee, we were to advise the town manager and the Select Board on the future needs of town buildings and to review and comment on capital projects related to town buildings, including schools. We were also charged to be an advisory design review committee and to review new construction and/or renovations to all town buildings. In the fall of 2017, the town manager appointed a design selection committee at the request of the Permanent Building Committee, consisting of myself, Chris Cove, Jim Layden, Director of the Adult Center, Barry Jarvis, Director of Parks and Rec, Stephen Crane, Town Manager, and Andrew Carr from the DPW for the purposes of selecting a new architect for the Adult Center, proposed Adult Center. A request for qualifications was published, and the town received some 5 applications. The Design Selection Committee reviewed those applications and elected to interview 2 architectural firms. The entire committee felt strongly that Catlin and Petrovic was the firm most qualified to design our town a new adult center. That team met with John Catlin numerous times to review both the existing and future programming needs of the Council on Aging and Parks and Recreation for the growing adult community of Long Meadow, as well as the needs of the Park and Rec Department of our town. Subsequently, Catlin and Petrovic met with the Building Committee 4 times. The committee made many recommendations as to square footage, value engineering, and the needs of not only the Adult Center, but also the Veterans Agent, Outreach Coordinator, Town Nurse, Food Bank, and Federal Meals on Wheels programs. We also reviewed the strong need to the town for additional gymnasium space for all of our residents, particularly in the winter months. Catlin has modified the plan multiple times, taking this information, comments, and suggestions into consideration. We believe that this plan meets the intergenerational needs of the town today and will meet those same needs in the future. The entire committee, Building Committee, endorses this preliminary plan. John Catlin has listened to all of our recommendations and has come up with the plan that he is going to present to you this evening. On February 1st, the Building Committee voted unanimously to recommend that the Select Board move forward with a warrant article to be submitted to the town residents at the May 2018 town meeting. I believe you've received a preliminary draft of that warrant article. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce to you John Catlin of Catlin Petrovic, who will present to you the preliminary plan for the new adult center at Greenwood Park. John is an expert in the needs of the residents, and in Massachusetts alone, he has designed over 46 senior centers. He has designed senior centers in other states as well as other town-type buildings that are needed. So, John?
Thank you, Mary Beth. I've been told to be very brief. I'll do my best. If I go a little fast, you can always ask back. But I'm going to be handing out this as a printed document for you to take away. But as you know, Greenwood Park is...
Excuse me.
Oh.
Does he need to speak
Yeah,
into the
you-
microphone?
Oh, I need to be over here?
Or
The microphone's not for the room, but it's for the people at home.
the residents won't hear you.
I'll snuggle up over here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm used to
and-
wandering around. I'm sorry.
And just before we get started, are there any centers around here, senior centers in this regional Western Mass that you've done?
Sure. Well, the Holyoke Senior Center is one.
Holyoke?
A small one in Hamden.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of them, but Holyoke is the latest one. We're just now finishing, we just finished one in Wellesley, Mass, a little farther away.
Yeah.
And we have one under construction in Walpole, Massachusetts right now.
Thank you.
Similar sizes. As we all know, this is Greenwood Park, and the red elements are buildings that are on the park. Let's see what I can do this far away. There you go. We looked at the site. Our marching orders were to the existing buildings, the remain, which is, of course, this area here, the recreation and the former or current senior center. The tennis courts, through a lot of discussion, there are other courts in town. These are not in the best of shape, and they're talking about maybe adding some more courts later on. We added a play field, which is really 3 fields in one. It's a middle school field, and it's also can be divided into 2 small youth group fields. Outside here, we have a pair of pickleball courts. There's an outdoor patio, and you can see the sun. This is the south. So all the program spaces in the building are on the south side. We have parking spaces for 141 folks, and that includes the parking adjacent to the pool, which is here, which would remain in place. The entrance off would be one way in, circulating on-site and leaving back out the existing driveway over here. And the parking would be held back from, I think it's Maple, is it Maple? Maple Street, Maple Road, and screened from the road. I will mention real quickly that the gymnasium is this structure here. It's placed in this location in order to have accessibility for the existing youth center, as well as other outdoor activities off that gymnasium, and also being combined with the senior center. You have an interaction there. We did a program. The program came out to be about 16,425 square feet. That includes the gymnasium, which is about a little over 8,000 square feet. And the colors, the red are program areas, the yellow areas are large open spaces for moving through and having seating. The main entrance is here. The gymnasium entrance is separate for other activities that would go on, either school activities or other basketball groups in the evening. The area that Mary Beth talked about, the food pantry, the veterans office, and the nurse, have their own separate entrance, but also has access into the senior center. Part of that is because there's activities going on there that don't necessarily relate to the senior center itself. And what's really important is the nurse does see young people who might be coming in with various viruses, and we'd like to be very careful not to expose our seniors to that. There would be a multi-purpose room serviced by a kitchen, storage area here. That room opens up onto a patio area, and there's a performance platform here, or we call it a stage, which is good for interior presentations, but it also would open up out onto the patio for summertime outdoor presentations. There'd be a second floor. The reason for the second floor is to reduce its footprint on the site and make as much of the site available for other uses. Up there would be classrooms, a game area that overlooks the multi-purpose room, a fitness facility that would connect to an upper walking track or running track, however one would like to use it. That's accessible both from the gym and from the senior center itself.
Excuse me, would there be an elevator?
Yes, of course.
Okay, just
Here. Yes, the elevator's right here. There's an open main stair here. I'll show you a little bit how that looks in just a minute.
Thank you.
And keep moving along here. Elevations of the building. Just very quickly, this is the outdoor stage area that I talked about out onto the patio. This is the gymnasium. That's the front entrance here. Similar elevations. That's a rendering of this is, again, very preliminary. This is a study, but this is our first effort at pulling together the building into something that a request of the committee, and the committee was to stay in a traditional mode. And you can see that this would be the main entrance. There's a covered area here with the entrance into the community space that is the food pantry and the veterans office and the nurse, and service to the kitchen and operation at the back here. The gymnasium's main entrance would be over here. That's looking out to the rear. To the south, where the performance area and outdoor patio for outdoor activities, and overlooking the playing field that would be over in this area. Some of the ideas, this is the idea of a main open stair that helps bring people upstairs. The elevator is adjacent to it, how it works. We really promote two-story buildings when you get over about 10,000 square feet. We always like to say that stairways are really important for elders in terms of what we call stealth exercise. You want to walk 5 or 6 flights a day. How the gymnasium might be used. This happens to be the gymnasium for the town of Natick. This happened to be on a major snow day. So normally let me go back for a minute. Normally all of these chairs are full. and you can see a lot of them have their overcoats. And they do a series of exercises, and they also walk the gym. This gym is used after hours by youth groups, young adults. It's a great young adult program. They run till as late as 11 o'clock at night, and they run on Saturdays and Sunday afternoons and evenings. The upper walking track or running track would look a lot like that. This is a proposed rendering of how it might look, overlooking out into the playing fields out here, connecting with large doors that open up to allow in and out in the summertime. The gymnasium is set up for basketball, volleyball, and indoor pickleball in the winter. Pickleball is getting to be very hot amongst our, me too, I play it, so, oops, sorry. The budget in current dollars is the adult community centers at 16,000 square feet. We're allowing right now $465 per square foot, resulting in a number of about $7.4 million. The gymnasium, which is 8,275 square feet at $450, is $3,727,000. The total bricks and mortar cost, including site work, is estimated to be $11,187,000. We have soft costs carried at 25%, which includes both FF&E, contingencies, testing, bidding, and A&E fees. It's normally 30%, but the gymnasium is a very large part of it, and it doesn't have as much FF&E in it, so that's been reduced a bit. We also looked briefly and talked with the committee about what the future might hold for this site. This is not written in stone, but we're showing that if the building ultimately, if not repositioned for other uses, would be removed, we could add more playing fields. We would move the youth group over to adjacent to the gym. And what's nice about this is that the youth group enters the gym from this side. The elders can use it from this side through programming. They would have their own parking area connecting into this, and the seniors would use this area. The swimming pool would be over here. That's just a thought about what might happen in the future. I hope that was quick enough. Stephen?
Well done.
Thank you. I did bring along, that Mary Ann can actually hand out, two different books. One of this presentation, and then a book of some of the work that we've done in the Commonwealth.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions from the board at this point?
Before you start asking questions, we were kind of half teasing John about the brevity of presentations, and that's a result of some presentations and discussions in other meetings where he's been a lot longer in his presentations, but that's only because he's done so many of these and has really, for me, been helpful. And I think I speak on behalf of the building committee as well when I say that his experience and specific anecdotes about room choices and material choices and things like that and the many other centers he's done has been a really great addition to the process. And so the reason why we're teasing about being brief was because he knows too much about senior centers, and we would get no other business done if we went on at full length. But I do want to commend John for his work on this. We've, I think, achieved a lot of efficiencies in the design you just saw because of his experience. So,
And I warned them that I give 6-hour lectures on this around the country. So they said, please.
Most of our meetings that lasted a couple of hours with Mr. Catlin.
All right, well, don't test Mark Gold. He could have 6 hours worth of questions, but Mark, let's start with the first.
Well, you should absorb it too. Takes
That's
a while.
fine. Mary Beth, my first questions were for you, because you'd started out by saying that there was I'm calling a subcommittee, but a group that was appointed from the Permanent Building Committee, and then you talked about the committee that did things. Can you just differentiate what the entire committee did relative to this versus what the subcommittee?
Oh, the subcommittee was only responsible for selecting the architect. All of the other work was done by the Permanent Building Committee.
Okay.
You know, we've met with John Catlin numerous times, as I said,
as the
meetings
whole-
that lasted hours, I mean, many hours. I've had many phone conversations with him. Jim Layden and Barry Jarvis did meet with him when they went through the programming needs, and, you know, that was under the Design Selection Committee to make sure that the building met the programming needs of both of those departments.
Okay, so
But that
it
was
wasn't
done under the
entire
Pardon?
committee? It was the entire building committee?
Absolutely.
Okay, it just wasn't clear to me the first time. The other question I had is, John, you'd said that the existing building was to remain based on what you were told, and I guess, the first thing that came up when I saw this design with a gymnasium was, now we got 2 gymnasiums. One of the complaints was we didn't want to get rid of the gymnasium we had because the very first preliminary design we saw had nothing at all, and now we end up with 2, which has a pretty substantial added cost to it for this building. I guess the question is, is that something we really want to, and it's not for John so much, and it's not necessarily for you, Mary Beth, I think it's for the community to figure out is are we willing to spend that kind of money for a second gymnasium? I mean, the last slide, which was the what do you do in the future, was kind of the redeeming value for that gymnasium, is that eventually you don't need it at all, and you don't need the current building. Because I'm sitting here and saying, now, what do we do with the south side of the current building once it's empty? And are we going to sit there and heat or not heat, or watch a building fall apart or tear it down, or is there any plan on what we do? And maybe that's part of the question for the permanent building committee is, so now we're going to say we want to keep the youth services program, the daycare, aftercare school program, but what do we do with that whole south side that's currently the adult center?
Yeah, well, in my conversations with Barry, she's made it very clear to me that 75% of the revenue stream into the Parks and Rec Department comes from Greenwood Park. And a good deal of that is through the daycare programs that are held in the building in the evenings, that they're fee-based, as well as the summer camp programs that are held over there. Now, I don't have the exact itemization of that, but in my conversations with her, she's been very specific that she needs that building. The after-school program also uses that building, and that's another revenue stream into the building. I also want to point out that the existing gymnasium, I am not an expert in gymnasiums, and I'll be the first to tell you that, but I understand that the existing gymnasium is a grammar school size and not a legal size gymnasium that we're proposing here.
Yeah, I mean, if I reinforce Mary Beth's point, the gymnasium was the gym similar to what is being proposed here was something that was in the previous iteration of the study that I pushed for, because it's not really 2 gyms like apples and apples. The gym in Greenwood is completely inadequate and undersized for virtually everything, whereas if you do a gym of this size, you can do 2 pickleball games or 2 basketball games across, versus tying up the entire facility. So you can double the amount of programming with a gym like this versus the one we have, and that's really the goal. And in terms of the reuse of the building, I guess, the Greenwood Children's Center is still there, the after-school program is there. We could look at options for expansion. We could look at, maybe relocating some town offices. I mean, this is all moving relatively quickly, but I'm sure we would figure it out.
Okay. I guess the last question I have is that there was and I think it was in your presentation, but certainly in what we had, there was a list of each building and its number of square feet.
Correct.
But what I didn't see is a comparison of our current building with this proposal. In other words, how many square feet is there of, and I don't even know, bridge, where they play bridge, or fitness centers, or that in the current building, so we can kind of get a sense of how much more are we getting with this design. And
We
I was
could
wondering
get
if
that for you, Mark?
I think that'd be-
I know I
we
have
have
that.
it.
I think it's about
some.
We
7,500
actually
square
had
feet.
some of that in the very early
Right.
Okay.
presentation to the committee. We did a comparison.
Yeah.
And we
Right.
can certainly make that available very
Yeah, I
quickly.
think that would be really useful, just as I said. so we know.
My understanding, this is just from recollection, is that there was a total of 8,000 square feet
Yeah.
currently used by the senior center. And this is close to doubling that space size.
Well, yeah, but
But I get what
8,000
you're
of this
saying,
is
yeah.
the gym. So I'm
Right, I agree.
That's why I was looking at, especially program by program. Well, the nurse's office now has 0, so it's going to go from 0 to whatever it is, and
Right.
the veterans office goes from 20 square feet to whatever this is going to. But I know there are programs in the current building. I just think it would be useful to get that.
Sure,
that
we'd be glad to
comparison,
get that for you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
Maria?
2 things about what you were talking about. And that was, I heard, this was a couple of years ago, that Parks and Rec said they'd have no trouble programming the senior side of the building because there's a lot of programs they haven't brought forward because they just didn't have the space. And then someone mentioned, and I'm not sure who was, that if it comes down that the two middle schools are combined to one middle school, we'll be down one gym. And so, and right now, we're short a gym, I understand. There's not enough gym space. And so programs cannot be held in town because we just don't have the gym space. So if we're really looking at some long-term planning, that might be another reason that the community might want to invest in the gym. But it is, it's tough to decide, is the gym the right thing now, or is start with the senior center? And I think there's going to be an appetite out there that people want gym space, from what I've been hearing over the past few years.
Yes, Richard.
Yeah, my recommendation is that when you finally come forward, though, that it be a complete plan, and not like Stephen said, this is moving so fast we can't put our hands down, because I think people are going to want a final determination on every building that's up there now and what the new thing is going to look like. 'Cause I will never be an opponent of piecemealing this. I want to see this one planned right and presented 100% to the town when they vote on it, with all the questions answered this time. We've spent too much money on this not to have a total, complete plan to be delivered to our community. And this thing has morphed from 180 degrees, 360 degrees. It's been all over the place. And we still got that big question mark about the infrastructure that's there and what it's going to be done with. And that's really not to the architect, it's to the design committee and to the town manager. Like Mark was alluding on it, we've got a massive amount of money invested in electrical systems and everything else on the other side of there, and if it's any way to use it, then this is the time to come forward with plans to utilize some of that, of our previous monetary investments in this structure.
Well, I was just going to ask, with the Meals on Wheels program, like Richard's saying, we've done a lot of work on the kitchen in the current location. Would it stay in that facility, or would this new building do all the Meals on Wheels?
You want to take it?
I would say that a lot of that investment is movable, too, especially your major range, which is a big number, is actually in very good condition. I'm not quite sure whether the hood's up to current codes, but one of the things that we talked about, right now, the design anticipates Meals on Wheels. That's why we have the entrance to the side. But what's also, I think, important to note about that, how that existing building gets repositioned, we talked quite a bit about it, about what triggers. You've got an investment in it, which is probably worth holding on to another 5, 10, 15 years, maybe longer. But if you want to go in and start fixing that building, you begin to trigger some of the state code requirements. Wiring, energy, the windows are all aluminum, single pane. There's a lot of stuff going on there that really gets triggered and adds a lot more expense. So when you make that decision on that building, which is perfectly usable right now, but down the road, if you want to upgrade it or do other things with it, other than just moving in offices or expanding a program in it, you're going to be triggering quite a bit of expense, which we've talked about at some length in our meetings as we've been looking at this project. And thus, the idea of the way it was set up with the senior center, it's really a 3-step program. You've got the senior center, the gym, which is more than just for seniors, it's a community gym. And then you have the option down the road. It's designed so that we actually designed the height and everything to allow another building to be built adjacent to it for the daycare, after school, and that camp and all the camp. And then what happens is that park it gets a lot more outdoor space that really becomes functional for the town. But the idea is that I think the committee, along with our team, wanted to show that it's designed for future thought and process, not an immediate tear down the building and get rid of it, because it's a good building, it's being used. And it may be 15 years as the bond is going down that this becomes another program for you to do. God bless.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't, Marie, did you want to say something else?
Well, I was just going to
Yeah.
say that the use of Greenwood, I'm not sure if that's the building committee job. Would that be more of the planning? Exactly. So that's what, instead of putting a new job on them, but I think it would be worthwhile to hear what your plans are, maybe for
Well,
town meeting.
I don't totally agree with that. The envisionment of a permanent building committee was to provide guidance, independent of everybody, on all projects being developed in this town. And that includes the disposition on this property. They have to have recommendations. It's not the town manager who's going to make those recommendations. This group is going to be here forever. That's why we put a permanent building committee in, to solidify all of our planning efforts and to bring a process in place that unfolds every time we bring a project towards them. So we can't just arbitrarily say we're going to shift this off, because that's what we've been doing in the past, and that's inappropriate planning.
Well, I was thinking this is
holistic-
programming, isn't it, rather
Yeah,
than
and you can talk about
infrastructure?
what particular department would go into a thing.
Well, but I agree, but those decisions have to be made up front this time. Because if we go to the voters and ask for money, it's going to be the one-time shot. This project has crept from $7 million to $13 million. Okay, remember the $7 million project was dragged around here in that estimate, and it still lingers. That's the problem on putting estimates out before we're really ready, is because this, and what you've done is beautiful. There's no doubt about it. But it has changed considerably, and we still have a goose egg. That's just for this. That doesn't even talk about what we do at Greenwood Center.
If I could just comment on that for a minute. I know, going back even 2 years ago, the number that was used was $8 million for the new senior center, and then whatever the gymnasium would cost on top of that. At that point, we did not have an architect.
You did not have a gymnasium in there either.
We always talked about having a gymnasium,
It was
Richard.
not well-known if you did.
Oh.
And now we have a permanent building committee, and that's the reason we put the permanent building committee in effect, was to serve our town to come up with quality planning and vision for the future. I just want to make sure we don't get another slap in the face on this. And this has to be holistically planned and the whole delivery at one time, not piecemeal.
So if I can just address that, just from a process standpoint, and I guess I'd say in advocacy for the devil, the directive was to do a freestanding, come up with a conceptual design for a freestanding senior center at Greenwood, and that's what we're discussing here. That was the intent of the warrant article, and that was the directive, I think, to me. So in terms of planning for Greenwood, I agree. I mean, I think it's a challenge. It really isn't the role of the permanent building committee to analyze town departments and see who we put in there. That is a town manager role.
They're not analyzing town departments.
But I think when you say, what are we going to do with it, we're either going to, there aren't really a whole lot of options. We're not really expanding our town departments. And as John noted, if you're going to renovate it, you're going to get into some expense. Maybe we do some selective demolition and maintain I mean, there's a lot of options out there, but I think one of the things I just want to note for the record is, even if there isn't a planned use for that now, I think there's agreement at the permanent building committee level that it doesn't adequately meet the needs of the senior community. And I think that's whether or not we have a use for Greenwood doesn't change the fact that it doesn't meet the needs of the seniors today. And so while I do agree with you that we need to give some thought to Greenwood, and that's not a long-term problem, that is a short to mid-term problem if this project advances. I don't want to get caught up in if we don't have a plan for Greenwood, we shouldn't be talking about a new center, because we need to meet the needs of the community.
Well, then maybe you do need to get caught up in that planning.
Okay.
Because that needs to be done. Because you're going to need money for whatever you're going to do at Greenwood. And I think we need to bring it all out at one time. We've had several years to think about this. This is not a new project. And it's time and it's all brought. And I really disagree with you on this permanent building committee's thrust, because you and I talked about this a long way before this committee ever came up. And that was the purpose of this committee, was to be involved, not for the operational point. But if you're saying you want to expand operation, then you should have a plan that's submitted. And the permanent building committee looks at it and they weigh that factor too. It's a community teamship, or a team that we've hopefully put together for that purpose. Not all town managers that come and go are going to have the same thoughts and processes, but the permanent building committee is going to be here. This is a fixture, hopefully will be in this town 50 years from now.
Marie?
Yeah, I would actually like to see programming recommendations from the town manager or its departments on what you would be using. And you could bring that to the select board, and then we could give that in the future for the building committee.
Okay.
So we'll have answers.
I did have just, I don't know, you don't have to answer this question. But, you know, in the centers in Holyoke and Hamden, were there residents who made contributions to, you know, name a certain area after somebody?
Come to Holyoke and you'll see that
Yeah.
the Big Y contributed the cost of the cafe.
Okay.
The large multi-purpose room, I get the banks confused, so forgive me. Either People's
Chicopee Savings.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. don't-
No, our multi-purpose room, I think People's was
Was
in
it
there.
People's?
Yeah.
I know Chicopee Savings.
And
gave a
whether it was
significant
People's,
amount.
there's two different People's out there, so I don't know which one. But if you go there, you'll see plaques on even the very small elements. I had a senior the other day when I stopped by there who very proudly took me upstairs to show the window that he gave, and his plaque was on that window. They raised about $700,000, $800,000 from the community. And in some communities, that's really important. In Walpole, you know how they name stadiums? They're naming their senior center after the Walpole Savings Bank for $500,000. So there is, and I think in Walpole they've already raised close to $700,000, and we're just beginning. The structure is just going up. Most of the fundraising comes later, and it's really interesting. The big numbers are not available for our smaller folks in town to contribute, but when we do the patios, we use a recycled rubber brick made out of tires, and they laser engrave them. And that's what I call entry-level giving. And an average patio will raise $250,000 through small donations by in memorial to your parents or in honor of your children or whatever it might be. So, yes, there's quite a bit of raising that goes on. In Belmont, we raised about $1.3 million. So it does happen. It's a very good question. I do want to make one quick comment about what Richard was saying. 2.5, 3 years ago, we were building these buildings for 30% less than what they're costing today. Each year, I built, now Holyoke was a larger building, but in 2005, that building cost $285 a square foot. That's not what we're hearing, that's not what's happening today. So it's important to note that delay,
Cost.
I'm not trying to push you into a decision, but delay every year costs a lot. And I'm shocked at the numbers that are coming in.
I believe that the one that was just finished in Blunt Park for the city of Springfield, that I'm sure you saw the advertisement on, that went off at $398 a square foot, and now we're talking 20% higher than that. If
And that's a
this
large
is going to
building.
happen, it needs to get moving for the pricing, because the market conditions are such in construction that prices are accelerating faster than you can imagine.
Yes, sir.
Just one of the things that I didn't see in your renderings, and I know these are very, very preliminary, was, you know, energy neutral or zero energy concepts. There were no solar panels being shown, or no, you know, I assume that we can do anything we want to do, but, you know, more importantly is, how would that change your cost estimate? I mean, none of that stuff comes cheap.
Yeah.
But yet, in the long term, it's probably a darn good investment.
Yeah, in Holyoke, we did geothermal. It was a challenge getting it running, but I'll give you an idea. We just literally finished the Wellesley Senior Center. We designed it, that building could easily get what we, in LEED, you know, Leadership in Energy Environmental Design. That building would easily be a gold building. It's got R40 walls and R60 ceilings, triple pane glass. All the lighting is LED. Its operational costs are very different than, like, let's say, the existing building you have there. The operational costs in a new building are way down below. The real difference is that under the current codes, there's a lot of health issues in these buildings that require the energy stretch code with fresh air coming in for people. We now use an energy system that allows you, the air that you exit out of the building, we take the heat out of it, and we take that heat and we add it to the air we bring into the building. So the latest, I would say that, let me see, Irving was geothermal, a small one. Geothermal is an expensive item, and but we can do a lot in these buildings to make them operationally efficient through the current insulation systems that we have today that we didn't have even 5-10 years ago. I always like to tell my clients that the cheapest part of this building is building it. The real cost is operation. And the more you can invest in your building up front to reduce the overall energy and operational cost down the road makes a huge difference. In 20 years, you will have bought that building again if it's not properly designed. In fact, this building and all of our municipal buildings are now designed to be what we don't call it zero maintenance, but we call it extremely low maintenance. We don't have anything that's painted on the building, on the exterior, because one of the great problems we have with our communities is called capital deferred maintenance, where you don't do anything about it, and then finally one day it's a capital cost and not a maintenance cost. This building is being very carefully designed with that in mind. All our windows are metal clad on the outside so that they don't have to be managed. But to answer that, I hope that answer is that this building, under its current numbers that we're talking about, is a very high efficiently designed building to lower energy costs.
All right, if we have no further questions, I would
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Thank
presentation.
you for the opportunity. And you're right, there's a lot more to do. Shut it down.
Thank you, Jim.
You just pass these.
And so, in terms of discussing this for a warrant article, is this something?
that this was going to be voted on?
No, it wasn't. It was not discussed as being voted on. It was discussed as we were going to have this presentation.
Yeah, they just made they're just presenting their recommendation. We'll present a draft warrant article for your review when we roll out the first draft of the warrant.
March, actually. Okay. So,
Unless you want sooner than that, we just thought it would be folded in with the rest of the warrant.
It was written already.
Article 4,
Standard.
I mean, I guess the question I have is, when you go on a warrant, you're going to need numbers. Is that the number you're going to use, the 13 point whatever we saw there?
Yeah.
Yep. That'd be it. So,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, Mark, let me get you this. Oh, this is Bill. This is, we'll back this. Deb, this would be for Bill also. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, Tom,
No, you're not.
Tassie's here.
What?
Tassie's here. The last interview, Cassie.
Oh, last interview, Cassie, yes, okay. That's who it is, okay.
No, he's just saying the next interview person's here. I thought you were saying Tass was here.
All right.
Panicking.
Exactly.
No, yes, so Cassie, if you want to come up and introduce yourself and just state your name and your address and then the board you're applying for.
Yes, my name is Tassie Planky. I live at 27 South Park Ave. I've been there about 14 years. And I'm applying to be on the Cultural Council.
All right, and so any special reason you're interested in that board?
I work at the Storrs Library, and we've had some amazing programs that have been funded by the Cultural Council. So I'm really impressed by what they do. I realize that by working at the Storrs Library, wouldn't be able to vote on the things that were coming to the library.
Right.
But I think that the things that brings to town is very interesting. So I've sat in on a couple of the meetings at the encouragement of Jean Maziarz.
Okay, Cassie, thanks. And do we have any questions?
Well, thank you. It's a great group. And like you said, they're doing exciting things from the art and everything.
Yeah.
The play, so thank you for volunteering.
And would this be the first board committee you want to be
Yes.
a member of?
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks. And I was impressed you did your research and sat in a couple meetings to see how they run it, so that's nice. Richard, did you?
Yeah. What do you want to bring to the committee?
Some youth, which is funny for me to say because I'm in my 40s, but mostly like I work in the children's department, and I know what the young families in town and the young kids want to see. So I feel like I could kind of speak for them in terms of what we're bringing into town and what we're prioritizing.
That's good. That's a good answer. That's what I was hoping I'd hear you say.
I'm sure Jean's at home going, youth?
I know.
Do you know who you work
That's not what I
for?
meant. I meant to.
Because Jean is on the committee. Her boss,
Right.
Jean Maziard, is on the committee. No one knows. We don't tell her.
Okay.
All right, so, well, thank you, and we'll let you know in a couple
Okay.
weeks, and
Thank you.
thanks for coming in.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Do we want to approve the minutes from our meeting? Yes. Do you have a motion?
Was I here?
The January 16th regular meeting?
I'll move we approve the minutes of the January 16th, 2018 regular meeting, subject to a couple of additions.
We got a second?
Well, I sort of left halfway through, so.
Well,
if you want a second.
those are the additions. I think that what we liked, I think we need to indicate that people left because it goes from everybody's here and then the vote is 3-0. And
Okay.
I think we need to explain
Okay.
why the.
Okay,
So-
second.
Okay, so it's
Debbie, I've got
been seconded,
when people
yeah.
left, I think you'd probably do too, but I
Yeah,
could-
she's got it written in there. Yeah, I got sick and left at 8:30.
Okay.
If you want to have something more to add, Mark.
That was it. I mean,
That was
just
it.
Oh, that was.
you know,
It's on there. It's on there on the top.
It says, yeah, Marie left and Foster left 9:25,
Okay, that's fine.
and so that should cover
All
it.
right.
All right, so if we have that cleared up, then.
Yeah, then I'll just move we approve the minutes of the January 16th meeting.
Okay. And we still have a second on that, Marie?
Yeah.
And then all those in favor?
And I'm going to abstain.
Okay. So
Why are you
we have a couple of
Because I
votes on it.
only was there like an hour and a half.
Oh,
Yeah.
maybe I should half it.
And I
abstain.
mentally was out. I really wasn't always
You don't have
there.
enough information to know if the minutes are accurate, because you weren't here.
Yeah.
That's why people weren't in minutes are supposed to abstain, because,
Yeah, but if I
the-
abstain too, we're not going to approve the minutes.
I know, well, but you were here enough to vote on it.
Okay.
We give you permission, Richard.
And I might
Good.
shuttle out tonight, too.
Approved. Okay,
right.
moving on to the streetlight purchase discussion that Mark asked us to discuss. You know, there was a public hearing on April 12th at 7 PM. Or no, I'm sorry, there was a, there is a,
Where's that? Is that under old?
there's a
business?
petition that has been filed by the electrical companies for a 7% increase by North Star and a 27% increase by Western Mass Electric Company. And so in light of that petition for increase, right?
Well, at the rate hearing, or at the local version of the rate hearing, which was held back last year sometime, we went and testified, I gave some testimony about the impact of a decision made in the, I think it was 2011 or early 2000s rate case, when while they were raising our electric rates, they also allowed the electric companies to change the depreciation schedule of their streetlights. And I went and talked about the unintended consequences of what that did on the purchase price of streetlights to the town of Long Meadow. Our streetlights went, I won't say doubled, but it's pretty darn close that they doubled in price based on no new streetlights. And my request was that as long as you're going to a rate increase or a rate review, why don't you go and reverse what you did the last time which is bring the price of our streetlights back to something more reasonable that we can deal with. And the rate hearing rulings were issued. It's a 375, 380-page document, and somewhere around page 301, it says streetlights. And what it says is, we'll allow for, or in fact, we direct that for certain towns that, in our case, Eversource, be instructed to create it's called a tariff, which is a rate schedule for high-intensity streetlights or low LED streetlights, high-efficiency streetlights, not high-intensity streetlights. And again, it's 300-something pages. I haven't read it like an attorney, and I've only read it twice. But it essentially, they were mute on the subject of whether or not to roll back the depreciation schedule, in effect saying there's no change in the cost of our streetlights. And that's the purpose of what I want to say tonight. Not that there's now potentially a tariff for LED lights, which is nice, but doesn't do you any good unless you have LED lights. Just for the people at home, and I think the number is somewhere around $450,000, which is what we pay a year for our streetlights. And that's pretty much, combination of we pay rent for every light on the street that people see. Most of them we pay $8 a month, some we pay $6 a month, some there may be $10 or $12 a month for that light. And then we pay the electricity, and we pay the electricity based on, today is February 5th, the streetlights go on because the sun goes down at a certain time, they go up. So therefore, you pay X number of dollars overnight tonight for that streetlight based on its wattage. If the streetlight's burned out, we're still paying because there's no meters. So, we pay twice to Eversource. We pay for rent and we pay for the electricity. If we want to light our streetlights, we're always going to pay for electricity. But in theory, we could put in the same kind of lights we're being demanded to put into our homes, the LED lights or high-efficiency lights. And now we have a way of driving those costs down. We can drive those costs down maybe to a quarter of what we're paying now. The beauty of getting rid of the rental is that if we own the streetlights, we owe nothing. Marie and I have been talking the last couple of days. We've got a task force. We formed our last meeting. What are we going to do about our impinging upon the tax ceiling going on? And one of the great things we can do is stop paying for costs that we're paying. I mean, if we owned our streetlights today, if we bought them 15 years ago, we'd have $400,000 more to play with a year in our budget. That's how much about we cost, and so we spend on streetlights. And so, my request to discuss this tonight is to ask that we renew our efforts to purchase the streetlights. Now, we have, I think the number is like 5,400, some large number of streetlights. Some of them are on poles that are owned by the...
I think it's 1,500 streetlights.
Is that all it is? Okay.
Well, actually, I thought it was less, like 1,100.
1,500.
Let's call it 1,500.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you,
Yeah.
Steve. Some of them are on poles that are owned by the phone company, and Eversource pays rent to the phone company to put these on their poles. Some of them are freestanding, but we pay rental on every street light there, with the exception of Colony Hills, which owns some in their area, and a couple other areas in town where I think we already own our own streetlights. The theory is that, when we went to, at the time, Western Mass Electric, now Eversource, and said we want to buy our streetlights, the cost of the streetlights was ridiculously expensive, and they did that intentionally, and then they went and got the costs even higher. And my theory, and this isn't giving up any negotiation scheme in public, is, I don't think we want to buy all our streetlights at once. I think what we want to do is take a look at neighborhoods and say, a certain neighborhood of 100 streetlights or 200 streetlights, say to Western Mass Electric, or Eversource, we don't want your streetlights, take them out of that neighborhood, and we buy and install streetlights in that neighborhood only. In that neighborhood, we could bond the cost of those streetlights, bond them over 15 years or 20 years, where bond them to the point where the cost of the bond is 70% or 80% or some lower number, ideally, of the cost of the rent, so that ultimately we are paying less immediately, and when the bond's paid off, we're paying a lot less for the streetlights. Take that on one neighborhood at a time with a plan of some longer-term plan to replace the whole town. But the discussion I really wanted to have tonight is not the plan, but so much as we should be developing a plan. It's clear that there's money to be saved by the town owning our own streetlights, and there ought to be a way for us to affordably be able to purchase those streetlights and reduce our costs of operating safe streets. I've got a question from the left.
Thank you.
I was
Yes.
going to ask Marcus, he was talking, you were looking down. 1,000% agree. No doubt about it. If we'd done it 10 years ago, we'd be happy campers. I don't think that we have anybody on staff that could do the analysis that we want done and to present a package that we can break into segments to be able to go to the voters to get money, or for us to allocate dollars out of our normal budget each year. You know, you and I chatted a little bit about, what if we put $75,000 a year and just put it right in there and say, we're going to do this, it's our commitment. It's a 7-10-year program. But we don't have the factual information before us, and I don't know how you feel, Mark. It just...
No, I agree with you, Richard, but, Marie was talking about the MMA show. One of the groups I found at the MMA show is a group that, there are a bunch of people there selling streetlights. Come buy our streetlights, but there's one group there that said, we don't sell streetlights. What we do is we sell streetlight analysis services, and we'll write the plan for you. Now, I don't know if they're the best company. They're certainly not the only company around, but I think it's worth looking at this kind of an organization. I mean, we talked a couple of years ago about, first thing we need to do is renew the inventory of our streetlights. Remember we talked about getting a summer intern who would look at every streetlight and say, what light is it, and is it, check it off the list, and that kind of stuff. This company, the first thing they said is, what we do is we go around, we allocate 3 weeks, and we look at every street, exactly what we said we wanted to do. And then they said we'd go plan by plan and say, look, you got 12 streetlights in this neighborhood, you really only need 10 in today's day because they're better street. That I'd like to see us potentially allocate money toward hiring a firm to do that. You're right, we don't have the expertise to do this. And ultimately, a firm that helps us develop the strategy and then potentially even write the RFQ, which, a streetlight company helps us write an RFQ, they can't bid on it, so they're not going to want to help us write it, but there are companies out there, and I sent it along to Stephen, I don't know.
Well, can't you go out for a request for proposal, so?
But you can't, no, but if a company helps you write the request for proposal, aren't they banned from bidding on it?
Yeah, I think the thing what I would recommend first, and the rate case just came out, and it does say in the section
Page 301 or 308.
317, accordingly, the department directs Eversource to include an offering on its streetlight tariff for 25-watt LED rate. So they're saying now you have to offer the tariff, and the reason why we wouldn't really have ultimately saved a lot of money on our purchasing our streetlights even 10 years ago was because even if we'd switched over, we'd still be paying the same amount because of the lack of the tariff. What I would suggest is we re-engage George Woodbury, who helped us the last time, because he knows our system the best. And see what just to ask the question about what does this rate case do for us?
No, the group can do whatever they want, but George is a wonderful person, but we haven't been moving forward with him.
Yeah, but that wasn't his fault.
Well, it may not be his fault, but we spent a lot of money trying to get to there. But we're talking now not about fighting these people to get the thing. We're talking now about let's put in a plan of motion to progressively change our lights in this town, and we'll buy the things.
But he can run the financial analysis of the 25.
There's other people who can do it too.
I've also soured on George, and only because
Okay.
We had him before
The stuff
he
he
came
said
to
at the DPU was all of his information that he gave us.
Absolutely, but he hasn't moved us forward.
Well, I think we're going towards another direction in that, first of all, let's talk about the DPU, what they said. My understanding is a rate case was opened up, not for Eversource, but for the LED. They did that last summer. And I was told, well, it's going to take a year and a half for them to finally decide what that rate's going to be for us. So now it's coming out that they have to give them the rate. We still don't have a rate. We have a potential that they have to give us a rate. But the next step in the streetlights is what I talked to Stephen about, and it was handed over to the Energy Task Force, and we tried to do it. It's a nightmare because you have to figure out what the bulb is, you got to figure out what type of head it is, and no matter how many times we asked Eversource, tell us how to identify a bulb, how to identify the head, they couldn't do it. So we need someone who's going to walk in and say, you only need 3 lights here, this is what you're paying for now. And actually, by the way, you're paying for this and you're not even getting it, because we know that happened to Springfield. So George Woodbury was very good in telling us how to negotiate through the morass of laws and regulations that were tying our hands. And we're finally giving up. We're not going to change that depreciation on those poles. What we could do is we could try another bite of the apple, which is another letter saying that they're now asking them to decrease their rates again because of the tax, corporate taxes savings they're going to have, and say, while you're asking them to do that, Attorney General, please ask them to decrease their depreciation on their light poles. I think it's worth a letter. It might not get us anywhere, but it's worth another try and knocking on the door like we did the first time. But I say we do need someone who's going to start mapping out, saying this is where you need to go physically, not regulation-wise and law-wise. And then we'll have a map of what the next select board and the next select board can do. Because we're not gonna take it in one bite. I think that Rob and, no, we're not gonna do them all at once.
Get it all done.
No, in fact, Rob and Dave Miller, and Dave Miller was at that meeting with us also, did the analysis of the numbers from looking through the charts, and they said, well, until we get the LED thing, we're not saving much money here. It's not worth the investment on the buying the poles alone. And so I think we need to see the LED before we actually jump into it. And I wouldn't spend $750,000 on this project.
Well, wait, but I would think that we are at a point where we could write a good letter. I mean, Mark, you have enough.
Yeah.
And we could send a letter to the Attorney General, and I think that's a good next step. It isn't, maybe it won't be the final step that we were looking for, but I don't know if anyone would be willing to write a letter. I mean,
I'd be glad to write a letter.
Okay. I appreciate that.
I got to tell you, my frustration level on this is as high as it gets, only because we've been studying it and hiring George Woodbury to study it, and waiting for the DPUC
Right.
I want to take some action. I'll lay out my whole cards here, which is, I think that we can go back to Eversource and say, what's your price of your streetlights? And they're going to tell you $750,000 or something absurd for these streetlights. And I think the approach is to take with this is to say, look, we're going to take, I'm just throwing out streets, John Quill Lane, Williamsburg Drive, Long Meadow Street, whatever. We're going to replace those. We're going to buy them on our own. Eversource, you just take your lights out. We don't want them. We're not going to pay for them. We want them out of here, and we're giving you 60 days to get rid of them. I think if we do that 3 or 4 times, they're going to find out that not only are we not buying them from them, not only not paying them lease for them, we're costing them money to take them out of our town. Okay,
Right.
and at some point they're going to come. We're going to go to them and say, after we've done this 2 or 3 times, are you ready yet to sell the rest of them to us at a reasonable price? Because otherwise, we're going to keep this up, and you're going to spend money taking them out instead of getting a little bit of money and just abandoning them where they are. I mean, I don't know if that works with them. I have no idea whether they'll go for that. But if they don't, we need to be fully prepared to go step by step and just tell them, take your lights out. We've got a plan. It's a 10-year plan, but it's going to work.
Well,
I'm sorry.
But Stephen, we've got to take some action.
Yeah.
because
Mark,
we've been waiting.
my frustration is actually greater than yours, because for the many hours I've spent reporting the facts, you still make these suggestions that simply aren't based in fact.
So what are the
and don't work.
what are the facts as you know them?
The facts are they own the poles. They're not going to take their streetlights off of their poles just because we tell them to.
They're going to take
And
their
then
poles out.
they're not going to let us put our streetlights on their poles without some level of compensation. So now you're talking about putting in new poles and running wire. I mean,
Right,
there's a certain.
First of all, Eversource doesn't own, most of the poles are
It's about 50-50.
Before we go
electricity,
into
yeah.
whose plan's better, you said, Mark, that there is a company that will come in and
They'll
design
do
it.
the-
Could
they'll do
we
the-
maybe
assessment.
find out what the cost would be? And what, Paul, can you find out what the cost of this program would be for them to come and do, whether they do partial part of the town or they only do the whole
We can do
town?
solicitation.
Oh, yeah, we can have, just see what's out on the market. We can have Chad go through with his association, which is the purchasing.
You can request that of me, and I can pass that
Well, I
along to Paul.
thought he was,
I can
I
pass
thought
along
he
to
was the
Chad.
operational guy, so
No,
I
that's,
wasn't
it's,
sure.
we work it out amongst ourselves.
Okay, so we look at
I
the
mean, Marie,
cost
there's
of...
nothing else that's doing what the Energy Task Force realized that they weren't, not capable of.
Oh, yeah, we can't handle it.
Yeah,
We
And
can't
we
handle
weren't
it.
able to do it even with hiring summer help or whatever.
Right.
No,
So-
no, there's.
And that guy left. The only guy that knew how to do it's gone.
Yeah, no,
So,
as
okay.
soon as we were ready, and
Yes, yeah,
then he
he
just
left.
quit on us.
So,
So
let me
look at,
just,
wait,
let me just stop
wait,
this. Sorry.
we look at the cost of the assessment. Mark is going to write a letter. I just did have a question, because the poles carry a lot of cable also. And
I'm
so...
not sure.
The poles
Do
what?
they?
The cable...
The lighting,
ca-
light,
Our continental
Everything's on the
cable?
poles.
Huh?
This is the thing.
Because...
You can't piecemeal it like Mark is suggesting. It's just not how it works.
Yeah.
You either have to, and I think what the DPU is trying to get to is incentivize the utility companies to go ahead and purchase the LED fixtures and replace them themselves and then charge us the reduced rate. That's where I think this is going. That's the new model. So the utility companies still get the benefit of the revenue, and the municipalities get the benefit of the lower cost because of the more efficient fixture.
Right.
That is what I learned at MMA, is where this is all going, away from the towns purchasing them, owning them, and buying all the streetlights themselves. Again, I think this hit a stop because it was beyond our control to do this under the way things were constructed before this rate case came out, which was like last month. So the call for taking action, as if we've been ignoring this for years, is simply false. And we were told by green communities, the secretary at the time came here and told us, this isn't going to work because of this issue at the DPU. George Woodbury told us that. That's why we shifted away from the green communities. I am as big a supporter of doing this as anybody, but we're going to do it in a way that makes sense within the current paradigm of the DPU and the tariffs and everything else. And this is just now, we're just now hitting that moment when it's going to make sense.
Stephen, please answer the question of how anything that your understanding is of what this did impacts that 50% of the cost, which is rental. I mean, everything you said is absolutely right about the electric costs of running the lights. We're gonna get no benefit, now we'll get benefit, but we pay $200 and some odd thousand a year in rental costs, $2 a month, $8 a month, $12 a month, and we could eliminate that entirely.
But
Other towns have, even though the poles are owned by the Eversource or the phone company, whatever, they must lease you the pole. Worst comes to worst, we put a street pole, tell them to take theirs off their pole, and they must give us the electricity.
I can answer that question.
No, I'm going to answer that, and that is, that's the purpose of this company coming in and do the analysis on what is the best way to go forward and what is the most economic way for us. So I say, let's pull the experts in, if we could do a RFQ, RFP, whatever, and bring a company in to do an analysis for us. That would be great.
Can I just answer his question? Because there was an answer.
Right.
So with $7 or $8 or $9, whatever it is we're paying per month per light, O&M and electricity are the vast majority of that charge. The rental is, like you said, $1 or $2 on the $7 or $8 that we pay. The $700,000 or more to purchase the streetlights, at $2 a month per fixture, it would have taken us a million years to get a return on that, notwithstanding the electricity charges that we still would have incurred at the sodium vapor or metal halide rate, even though we had LED fixtures. And that's why it didn't make economic sense for us to do it. Now, if they have a new rate case, and I still think I still personally think we're better off having them replace them all and charge us a lower rate, because even though we don't own them, we're now not incurring the debt onto the tax rate to do this. And we're getting it's like our net metering credit agreements. We get the benefit of reduced solar energy without having to make the investment in the solar panels.
So you're
You and I
saying-
should sit down, because we're
Yeah.
180 degrees apart.
Right.
I disagree with your summary.
I have no doubt.
Okay, may I
Because
make a suggestion?
But wait a second, I don't want to let this go unchallenged, that in fact, the work we did 8 or 9 years ago said that at $400,000 cost for the purchase, we were marginally payable in 10 years or 12 years or
I'm
8
sorry.
years.
Well, you have to sit down with Rob and Dave, they did recent analysis, and they said the purchase of the light poles was not where we needed to be. And they backed off on the plan, so sit down, you could get with them and figure out what the new numbers are. But my question is, Stephen, are you saying that Eversource will come in and change all of our light fixtures to LED?
And double, and re-up the cost of it and add depreciation.
I don't know.
They'll charge us.
This is relatively new.
Okay,
But
so-
I thought that's what I heard, was that they were trying to incentivize utility companies to change them themselves by giving them tax credits and things like that at a higher level.
All right. Well, the only thing I'd
I
add
think
to
we need
this
to bring in some people who know
discussion
this business.
would
Yeah.
be that when we look at, replacing lights for more efficient, we would want to I'd lean in the direction of looking at lights that are approaching, the shops, those streets that approach the shops, so that we would facilitate more people walking in, and being able to walk in there. People walking from the high school towards the shops, and so forth. So
I think we got a plan.
all right, so we'll move forward on that.
So
Yeah.
what is our plan, and who's gonna move
Well,
forward?
it sounds like they gave you a job, Mark.
Well, my job was to write a letter.
No, we'll look into solicitation for a consultant to come in and see if this rate case that DPU just announced changes the game for us and how it does.
That's not what I
Yeah.
thought we asked. It wasn't, does the DPU case change the rate? I was thinking we need to have somebody come in and do evaluation of whether the purchase of our streetlights is viable, either in a lump sum, Richard said potentially lump sum, or in stages, and what that would
Audit.
entail.
Well, it starts with an audit.
It starts
And
with an audit, but that's
do
different
we-
from interpret the rate case for us.
Yeah, we
That's
need,
not what that's certainly
an
not what I'm looking
audit,
for.
and then decide if we can decrease the number of our light poles. Though that did get a previous select board into big trouble a few years ago.
But the issue is, some pretty significant percentage of light in these old lights goes upward instead of downward. I mean, you talk to
It's
people.
supposed to, yeah.
And they say that new
Yeah.
lights go
Yeah.
down, they're more effective, they're certainly more efficient.
Yeah.
And you can get away with more light on the streets with less lamp poles and less lumens.
And I'm feeling a lot of these companies do the audit for free because they're going to try to sell you something at
But
the
I don't
end of
think
it.
we want somebody doing it for free. I think we want somebody who's gonna give us a good independent audit, not just push their product.
Well, another thing is, as we look at this, we should find out what are the most walked streets, if we're going to replace certain areas, the places people walk most, like Long Meadow Street.
Even if we replace it, LED, I'm not sure if it's brighter.
No? I
LED
think
might be dimmer.
It might be dimmer.
How are they?
It works on lumens, and you
Yeah.
design it for the same number of lumens. It's just as light, but Tom, I don't think
It's
I
not
think,
gonna change it.
I mean, I'll take my street, for example. There are people who walk on up my street walking their dogs. They're gonna want streetlights. Now, I'm not near shops or anything else, but I think we'd be remiss if we took out streetlights of neighborhoods. That doesn't mean my neighborhood should be the first one for us to purchase our streetlights on, because, but if we're gonna purchase streetlights, we need to go somewhere and take a look at it. And I think we need somebody to encourage us how to do this.
Okay, and the other thing, the last thing in this discussion would be that there is going to be a public hearing in Western Mass at Springfield City Hall, April 12th at 7 PM. With
what?
And that public hearing will be with the electric companies, because they're talking about their proposed rate increases. So we could ask them
Is
any
that
questions.
DPU going to be there, or it's just Eversource is?
I believe it'd be the proposal was made by Eversource, and,
Oh.
yeah.
Well, I wouldn't, if it's just Eversource.
They had a whole series of meetings that they're going to have across the state. And so that's, yeah, that was a, yeah. Because they have to explain this, you know, a 27% increase. That's a big increase.
Yeah, but I think they're going to try to bring that down. I thought, but I read somewhere it was a no increase. We decided not to increase.
Yeah. That's
I'm
not-
going,
well,
how to-
I did look through that 427-page document, and it didn't sound like they were saying no increase. I think they were saying increase, and one of the things that struck me was they said that they needed some extra money because they need to set up a way for people to make a payment without a transaction fee. So they want people to be able to use their credit cards and their debt cards, so then they won't give them a transaction fee for taking their money.
Well,
You know,
what was the
God
date of that
forbid they
hearing?
take their money for free.
It's last year, I think.
Huh?
What was the date of that hearing?
The date of that is April 12th,
I think you were looking at last year's schedule.
7 PM.
Yeah.
Well, if that was the,
I'm looking at the website,
Yeah.
and it is misleading because it talks about
yeah.
going January 1st, 2018, but no, that was last year's hearing schedule. Because they've already issued they've already issued the determination.
Oh, well, I'll look and see. I'm glad if I'm corrected, that can happen. But that was the website I was directed to, so. All right, let me see if I can, let's look at the next thing on our agenda
Should go back to the town manager's report.
would be the town manager's report. We can do that. If you're ready.
We have the report. We talked a few times about Westcom marketing and various concerns last time we met about it, and, you know, we were in kind of a transition period after Hampden East Long Meadow got out, but we've started advancing some of our work items, like the finalization of a executive director job description we're probably going to advertise that this week and start that recruiting process. We set up a tax ID number, so the district has its own start of infrastructure to pay its own bills and manage its own finances once we do have an executive director on hand. And we are starting, and I'll have something probably for the next packet, developing a timeline for work processes and a map, essentially, of our technological infrastructure needs and what the technology will look like when it's deployed, how things are going to be integrated. We've had a lot of discussion with Chicopee over the last couple of weeks about how things will look moving forward, and some of the work they're doing, some build out they're doing in their police station as a part of this project to accommodate the regional dispatch center. Most significantly for me, a group of us went to the City of Worcester's dispatch center, it's a little different how it's constructed, or not constructed, the organization is constructed, not the center, in that it's a city agency, and they, not a district, but they host the town of Leicester in their dispatch center, and they basically are, in effect, a two-town rec as well. And Worcester's, 180,000 people, and Leicester's about 11,000 people, so it's an even more disparate difference between two communities in Long Meadow and Chicopee. It was actually a great visit in that a lot of the areas that they identified as some of their biggest issues are things that are some of our strengths, and they developed a system, a management system, and a staffing plan to help make sure that Leicester gets the dispatching resources it needs, but doesn't pay for dispatching resources it doesn't need. Actually, Leicester doesn't pay anything, so it's a good deal for them, but they figured out, the essential thing is, and this is what we wanted, we have one dispatcher on duty now. What we wanted was basically, in effect, 1.5 dispatchers on duty, so there could be accommodation for breaks, vacations, sick time, overflow calls, things like that. And Worcester has a position in there that's kind of since we just watched the Super Bowl, a free safety that basically sits next to Leicester's dispatcher, and if things get busy in Leicester, they're right there to basically jump in or take calls or sub in during breaks and things like that. Or if things are busy in Worcester, they can take calls and overflow there. And so it's kind of or just be somebody that goes around and calls the tow truck while the dispatcher is still talking to the patrol on the radio. So it's that position, that kind of flex position, was really an eye opener, and it's been very effective for them. And that was the thing the missing ingredient we knew we needed. And so I think all of the service chiefs and myself came back feeling much more confident and optimistic about our effort here, that operationally it can work.
And so what about the fire department? I mean, aren't they also included in this?
Sure. Yeah. So in how our system works right now is when you call 911 when you call 911 and you end up in Long Meadow Dispatch, whether it's for an ambulance call or a police call, you start with our police department dispatchers, and then they will transfer you over to the fire department, and a firefighter will take down your information and dispatch the call from there.
Okay.
It'll be essentially similar. That first front end will be a dispatcher in the regional center,
Right.
and then it'll go to a firefighter at the fire department to handle from there.
And the local fire. Oh, so because I always thought the fire dispatch and police dispatchers would be in the same location.
There's no fire dispatchers or police dispatchers. We only have just dispatchers, and they are in the police department. Fire department will get on and do some EMD work and things like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes if they're out on calls, they may not, they'll call somebody in to work the desk, but it's still that front end, the person that picks up the phone, you call 911,
Right, yeah.
is still the same people.
That's the same people. All right. Any other questions on the, because I was wondering, do you think that they made it a city department for some element of control over the?
It always was a city department. They just brought Leicester in to kind of, because really at the behest of the state, because the state obviously has been pushing regionalization for this.
And they were able to get the same kind of grant funding that we're looking at?
I actually think our grant allocation is going to be more favorable than theirs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mark.
Stephen, are they pushing this to expand it any further, or is this a system that they like the way it is? I mean,
The city of Worcester?
Worcester and Leicester saying, gee, we could use, we could handle 2 or 3 more towns with marginal increase in resources. So, and I guess the question is, are they trying to, and part 2 of the question is, so what's keeping the other towns from joining up? Is it, so far they don't need to make that major capital investment, and once they do, they're gonna find out how much better it is to join this system than spend another $750,000 on upgrading their equipment?
Well, I think that to answer your question, I do know that they said they have talked to some other towns. It's a brand new facility, and so they have some room for expansion, but not unlimited room for expansion. And when you say, why wouldn't other towns want to do this? Communities just have different, to some extent, it's a leap of faith still to do one of these things. And there's a lot of logistical work and planning work that goes into making sure that when you cut over, as we call it, on that first day, you don't have a drop in the ability to handle calls, and there's some complexity to doing that. And there are communities, and I don't want to pick on Hamden and East Long Meadow, but they just didn't feel like they could get through the timeline that we know we're on and make the changes they needed to make internally and basically hang in there on this. So different communities just have different tolerance for uncertainty. Like I said, I think last time we talked about it, that knowing that the police and fire chief both still believe strongly in it, and I think believe in more strongly now that we saw this setup with 2 very different communities making it work, like we kind of envision ourselves making it work with Chicopee. We've kept our eye on what do we have to gain by doing this, and it's a lot.
Yeah, but I would get the sense that some towns just like having an officer in the police station all night. So if someone walks up, they have someone there, then it's usually the dispatcher. That's the only person. Whereas, in our situation, they'd have to call 911, and an officer would have to go to the police station. We may not have anyone in the actual police station right?
That's
If
something we
your
talked about.
dispatch
They call that
isn't
the
there.
dark station, and we asked
Yeah.
Lester about that.
Yeah,
And they said once they there's a hand up, they call it a blue phone, blue light
Yeah.
phone. You pick up
Yeah.
the phone, you talk to a dispatcher immediately, but the dispatcher's sitting at the rack.
sure.
And we're in the process of looking at securing the lobby. So if somebody comes in and, they can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm in danger, someone's after me, they can lock the vestibule and keep them safe until an officer is never more than, 50 seconds away from the police station in
Right.
Long Meadow. So it's not,
Yeah.
and there often is a supervisor or somebody in the station. But that we can do, you can do video screens so they can see the dispatcher and have that level of comfort, but in that it really is appreciably not very different from the thick glass that you see the dispatcher on the side, because the dispatcher's not coming around they have to stay at their seat, and
Right, yeah.
they have the protocols that they're not going to be like a concierge or something like that. So the Leicester police chief said that, like I said, it was not a big deal for the community. It's so rare that something like that would happen that
Right.
the phone, like the automatic phone of the dispatcher, they felt would take care of the community's needs.
Okay, great. Any other questions on that? Okay.
So we just had the final tally for the Charlie Mike. Our numbers were down this year quite a bit, and I talk about that in the report, how I think in 2013 we first did it. We were, as far as I know, the only road race at that, in the region, around that time, around Veterans Day. And we had over 500 runners, and it was one of the biggest ones the timers had seen, in the area. And we were all thrilled with the success, but I think other people observed the success and have added races each year. The other thing is we were on Veterans Day, and it was a 3-day weekend, and we feel like that really kind of diminished our numbers. So we talked about it internally and felt that moving it to the weekend before Veterans Day was a better way to get still honor the holiday, but also get more participation. So we are going to try it on November 3rd this year, and hope to increase our runners and sponsorships to, be able to improve our donation. So we did give $1,000 each to the Holyoke Soldiers Home and Veterans Inc. Both, I think everybody knows the Holyoke Soldiers Home, but Veterans Inc. is a national organization that provides services to veterans in need.
And this year was unusually cold day, I would think.
It was.
It
was a cold. It was a sunny day.
Yeah.
But it was cold. But there was, I think, 2 other races that day. It's really competition from other events that's been the biggest problem. Just an update on the DPW design. Wednesday night they have their public hearing for site and design review of the planning board. The planning board will then probably vote after the hearing during their regular meeting to approve site and design review. We've gotten some comments internally. We'll present those to the board, the planning board. Nothing too dramatic. We've been able to do some value engineering on the project. We've made some reductions to the size of the administrative space, reduced the amount of asphalt, and are trying to find ways to make sure we come in at or under our budget in our last cost estimate. The other thing is we got some good news that the Springfield water line that's currently servicing the building can be used for fire suppression without the need for a supplemental pump, which is, I think when I don't know if Mike Richard came here last time,
Yeah,
but he
right,
talked
yeah.
about how much expensive the addition of that pump in a dedicated room was. That's a big break. We did, and I want to give Pete Thurber credit for really pushing to get a second flow test, because that second test was the one that showed that we didn't need it. You have in the packet, or as a supplement to the packet, the pre-qualification list. 13 general contractors were pre-qualified, and a whole bunch of subs in various disciplines were pre-qualified. That was both Weston and Sampson and our OPM Colliers felt like that was a pretty healthy response, and they're optimistic. One of the things I think we're going to try this year is electronic bidding. Typically, when you do a bid for a project like this, they bring in a forest full of trees and pay projects. Colliers did an electronic bidding for a school project in Granby, and they found that 90%, between 80 and 90% of the people who got pre-qualified did submit electronically, and most of these people are typing it up at their computers anyway, and you don't get handwritten in triplicate form estimates on a project like this.
Yeah.
And so entering it into a system is more beneficial, I think, because then the contractors don't have to print paper copies and the subs don't have to print paper copies. So we've been talking about it internally with Chad Thompson, our purchasing director, and we think that we're gonna go, there is a cost, I think, of, I don't know, $1,000 or something like that, maybe less than 1,000. You weren't there for that.
Sure.
No, he wasn't there. There's a nominal fee for the service, but it gives you immediately after the deadline is done, you know exactly what your bids are. It organizes everything. You don't have to go through and check to make sure they include their bid bond and all these other things. It just does it all automatically, so it'll save a bunch of time and energy, and I think we're going to give it a shot.
So that's a service you're paying for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Stephen, can I just ask
Yes,
a question?
Mark.
Stephen, that one, for site design at the, I guess, the planning board, are we asking for any variances or anything unusual, or is this all, essentially according to the whatever the, requirements are, the setbacks and all that kind of stuff?
So we meet all any variances will have to be granted by the ZBA.
Okay.
And we are looking for a special permit on the height of the salt shed. So a couple of feet. The peak of the salt shed is a couple of feet above 30 feet,
Okay.
maybe 32 or 35. And there was one other minor issue for the ZBA, but no, they really worked, since we have an ample site, they were able to really design for our needs within the site.
Right.
And now we're just, like I said, focused on, for example, we were able to take basically the front of the administration building. It has a vestibule, a pretty generous vestibule. We shrank the vestibule, and then we pushed basically the front of the building in 2 to 3 feet to shrink up some of the open spaces that, when I went to Hopkinton, they had a bunch of open space in the administrative area, and I said, $340 a square foot, it's a lot of wasted square footage, so we tightened up the design, and 2 feet across a 70-foot long front of the building is, I think it was $53,000 if you do the strictly $340 square foot calculation. So it's a lot of those little things will add up, I think, and hopefully get us on our number and come up with some bid alternates to add back if the climate comes back favorable.
But we don't anticipate any issues, though. That was the point of my question. You don't anticipate any issues at the planning board?
No.
Okay, that's
Weston and Sampson are just so experienced and skilled at this that they usually anticipate most of the stuff. So those requests for snow and ice cost year to date.
Thank you.
So they're in there. It's numbers obviously trending high, or we're going to have another event Wednesday. So
Fine, I mean, and we go over the 100,000 every year, but I just thought it was halfway through the year, it was worth seeing what they do. Paul, this pulled right out of Munis, is that how you do it? It looked like a lot of this was Munis.
Yeah, I think some of it had to be massaged a little bit, but most of the information is right out of
Okay,
Munis.
thank you.
and some of the stuff is, as Mark, there's contractual stuff that triggers some of that pricing.
Right, yeah, I'm not at all, I just was looking for what that bottom line number was relative to where we were.
One of the things is, and we go through this every year, it didn't snow that much. Why is it so expensive?
There's a lot of salt to put down.
Right, we pre-treat our roads, which is why they're usually in excellent condition, even in weather events. So that's one of and it costs the same to have the guy out there whether the plow is dropped or he's just spreading salt. And then special town meeting costs. The petitioners have, I don't know if they've written out the check yet, but they've said they're going to issue a reimbursement to the town for all their costs for the special town meeting, and that is about $2,300, all in, including police time, DPW time, election workers, ballot cards, all that stuff.
Great.
So that's it.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Actually, just requests for a future, in your town manager report or report. I wanted to know where things were with the Amtrak. I know that they said they were going to be paying, if you could check up and see where there's a timeline on that. And then the other thing was it just dropped out of my mind. That's why I have to write these things down. GPS systems. I know that we were supposed to be getting them installed in the vehicles. Are they in the vehicles, and what is being produced from them? And then the last question I have is, the Attorney General's office is like this big black hole that we send questions to, such as the public signs. We still don't know what we can do in the signage in town, but I guess that doesn't worry me so much as they're still not getting back to us on the park, putting on the liens, or what is it called? Changing the deed restrictions on the park, Laurel Park, and Bliss Park that was requested. And we were wondering, what is the process to truly do that? And if it really needs to be put on the ballot, we need to have heads up on that before we start doing our warrant. So that was my request, is try to chase that rabbit down the hole.
I will tell you that on Amtrak, I've been playing phone tag with Mass DOT for about a week. So I would hope that they have something to use. They don't call unless there's something positive to report.
Amtrak's got their hands full this week.
Yeah. The GPS units, we have been using them for a while. They've been in since last summer, I think.
Yes, I'd be interested what sort of data is coming out of those. I mean, I don't know what the markers that we have on there, or the indices.
And the AG's office did have a booth at MMA, and rather than chasing, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a solar or a streetlight vendor, and the trade show.
I stopped at the Attorney General. I asked him a question. He says, "Oh my gosh, just call somebody." He said, "I can't handle it."
The woman seemed fairly annoyed with me when I said, "Where the hell's the sign bylaw?"
Oh, you did ask him that?
And she's like, no idea what I was talking about. So I said, all right, well, can you mention it to somebody at the office?
Yeah, it was the legal interns. No, it doesn't work.
It's not.
No, but my bigger concern is that residents are waiting on the park issue. And we really, the heavier burden is we put it on the ballot. That's the biggest question. So I'd say just throw it on the ballot.
I don't want to be that guy, but we didn't send it to the Attorney General's office.
Oh, we didn't?
No, they did. The Save Our Parks people
did.
sent it to the Attorney General's office.
Oh, well, let's see if we can get.
Town council was working on it, and at the same time, they sent it to it, copied us in the letter, and that's fine. I mean, I think we want the Attorney General's input on it, but.
Well, should we wait if it wasn't our request and just ask our
We can,
own attorney
I don't
to
even know
figure it
who to
out?
call, but I can ask town council to see if they can find somebody at the Attorney General's office, but it wasn't our request.
Oh, okay.
No, Marie, you talked about the Attorney General's office and the sign bylaws, but now you're talking about it in terms of the deed restrictions on Laurel and.
Yeah,
and
so
Woodland.
there was those the two issues
Okay.
that Attorney
Because
two different ones. Yeah.
I thought the warrant article, and it was a citizens petition warrant article, whatever this means, directed the select board to file appropriate papers on
Right.
those
And we
parks.
just don't know what appropriate papers are. Because the question is.
So is that the question? What's the appropriate papers to
Right,
sign?
and the question is this: do we just go and file it, or does it have to go in front of the whole town, and the whole town has to vote on
Beyond the town meeting.
beyond the town meeting?
So
Because if-
why wouldn't we just,
I say we just put it on the warrant and put it on the ballot, because that's the heavier thing to. But then, if that's legally not required, I don't want to. I say we just have our own attorney figure it out. Attorney General's never going to figure anything out for us. So far, she's come up with nothing.
Once you ask the Attorney General, that's the end of it for us.
Well, we didn't ask them.
But they're still looking into it.
That could be
But
years.
but because it was citizens who asked them, they could be looking into it forever, or at their pace, as opposed to the division in Worcester, who's supposed to be more responsive to you and us than they are to a citizen's inquiry.
Yeah,
I
but-
think if we ask it on top of it, maybe we'll get a quicker answer.
We could.
Hey, he's raising his hand.
I was going to wait.
Go ahead.
I was going to wait. You all done?
Yep.
Okay, because I had, I said I had some comments I was
Yes.
going to make.
Yeah.
And it's a good place in here. It's about that time of the year where it's nice to get an idea on what's going on engineering-wise, on what the projects are coming up. And I can send this to you in a request form, but I'd like to give the town engineer, give us a rundown on the pavement, water, sewage, sidewalks, drainage, what he's got coming up this year, what his schedule's looking like. And Stephen, 2 years ago, the guys made up a map, and that really was a very effective way to demonstrate where the work was going to take place. If we could get him to run all the programs up there on what he's going to do. Another one, I'd like to know what he's doing on our TIP. What projects is he considering? And I think even more than that, I guess I've often wanted to know, how many roads do we have that are eligible for TIP? And what is Andy's thoughts on what he's looking at for even the 5-year window Has he got an idea on the conditions, and what has he got in his job jar that he's going to need our support? Because he's going to need design money on those tips if he's going to put something in tip. So I'd like Andy to give us a briefing. He's been here quite a while now. He's got his feet on the ground.
Yeah, that was the Long Meadow Street project.
No, but I'd like to know about all of our federal, all the streets in town that we could put tip programs in, and what's his thoughts on going forward in the next 5 to 7 years. And that really falls in line with this one up here on the, I said pavement, water, sewage, but that's in-house dollars. But I'm also talking about the Chapter 90. I'm also talking about what he's going to do for tip. And I do have another question, and I've asked this, and I don't know how I'll get an answer. I think I got to do it myself. Could you please give us a status on what is going to happen? And I can't parse the words any more cleaner than the disgusting condition of those guardrails across from Bark Hall Overlook. We now have got safety tape or something on them. If they're not going to fix them, let's tear them out. We have enough trees to snare vehicles going into that bank, but it is a quasi-safety feature, although I'm sure the ones down there would not hold a bicycle anymore because they're rotted. Most of them look like they're gone. And I know that must mean a lot more to me than anybody else in the world because I keep mentioning it. But I'm ready to repair them myself if you give me the timber. I just...
And you've been here a while.
Oh,
Be careful what you ask for.
and that's years. Well, unfortunately, it's like it's right in front of us, and we don't do anything about it because we see it every day. But that's a massive decay on that whole system. That's
Yes,
it.
Mark.
Yeah, I had two other things, though, Stephen, on a list just to talk about. One was, there was a memo going around about, we were asked by Eric Lesser's office if there was anything in the state,
That's right.
that state legislature, state budget, that I don't have anything, but I just wanted to bring that up because somebody else may have an idea that, pardon the expression, but for people at home, earmarks for the town of Long Meadow that we may need.
Guardrails.
Guardrails.
$10,000 to $25,000 or something, isn't that, what do you? is that-
Guardrails.
And they can suck money up quick.
Whatever it is, but maybe that is.
Okay.
But the other thing I just wanted to get a kind of a rundown on, because it was an issue that was in the paper and other things, is the Columbia gas issues of whatever was going on in town. If you can kind of give us your best take on that and whether it's under control, dare I say, or it's better understood, or Columbia realizes what they should have done that they didn't do.
The chief has been reporting on this regularly. In fact, as recently as this morning at our staff meeting, the fire chief.
Yeah, okay.
And I think they have it by and large under control. I don't think they found any issues.
Right.
They did 500 or something inspections so far, and they're still contending with some empty houses and some deny entry situations. But they're down into they've probably 80% done with all the inspections and didn't identify any significant issues anyway in each of the homes.
Okay, I guess one of the concerns I had was, from what I understood from Chief Dearborn's early notes, is that before this was even on, maybe about the time it was on the news, before it was on the news, before the town was notified, they started knocking on some doors saying, we need to come in your house, and people were a little bit understandably put off by that. And I guess that was more of the concern I have. And then Columbia came back and said, well, what are people worried about? All our people are driving Columbia gas trucks or what, but I guess to me that was the bigger deal than whatever, wherever started this. I mean, obviously they had an issue they thought they needed to resolve, but I think that was them just assuming that we can knock on doors and people are going to let us in was a little
I
difficult.
can assure you that was the primary concern for Chief Dearborn and Chief Stankiewicz as well at that time.
Yeah, okay, so
They had a meeting with the.
Right,
I guess that was the point of my
Right,
question, is
talking
that,
about, communication issue and how, one hand's gonna want the other
After that
to help.
initial kind of reaction that
Right.
Columbia Gas had to this issue, they did a good job communicating with us.
oh, okay, so that was my question. I guess, just as a quick follow-up, do we do the same thing if our staff has to go to knock on houses? I mean, do they only drive trucks? Do they have ID, any of that stuff? So they all have IDs and they all have trucks and,
Yeah.
okay.
That actually happened
I
just,
mean,
that happens regularly when we're doing water main projects and things like that, where we have to shut off, if there's a main break, we usually have to go door to door and let them know the water's gonna be turned on.
That's fine, I just didn't want to.
We have ID, I mean, we have usually a Long Meadow DPW shirt or an ID and a truck, and a orange and white truck.
But there's others too, like that first one may walk in.
Yeah.
She's gonna have an ID. Things of that nature. The assessor who needs to go out, there'll be an ID.
As long as we're not asking Columbia to do stuff we don't do ourselves, I guess. Although, maybe we do.
Okay, one more
I had
question,
one
yes.
thing.
I wasn't forgetting.
One thing I forgot to get out. It was earlier this evening mentioned that we were going to be discussing something in executive session tonight, and the words were put out, we were talking about not totally a complaint, accusations that were made in a political event here that our town manager may have been inappropriately involved in helping a resident get a warrant article, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And since it's been mentioned, we will brief the public. Marie and I plan on briefing the public at our next meeting as to the findings of this, but we have not discussed it in executive session yet with our town manager. But Marie and I have been, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, we have reviewed every email, I think there's 750 of them, and other correspondence, and that's what we will be reporting to the board in executive session tonight. And then I'll ask that Tom puts us on the agenda for next time, and we will tell the general public what we found and explain a little bit more about the circumstances. So I just wanted to clear that up so everybody's aware of what we were doing. We're not cloak and dagger, it's just a fact it was confidential information at this point. We're not ready to release yet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
And Marie, for your work on that. Okay, so I guess we can move now, if there's no other questions for the town manager, we will move to the we had the quarterly investment report, right? So we now go to the update of revenues and expense budget and for fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19 projections.
Okay.
Mr.
You have a written report that was part of your packet. I'll start with the FY18, where we are, where I think we're going, so on and so forth. As far as the revenues are concerned, we are a little bit ahead of schedule overall, mainly because of that $3 million that had come in advance payments for real estate. But overall, even with the local receipts, motor vehicle excise, interest, building permits, things of that nature, I'm very happy where we are. I think we're fully going to meet the expectations for FY18, and also with the FY19 projections that were made last October, which was basically a 2% increase from the 18 status. I think we'll fully hit those marks by the end of this fiscal year, so it just gets some reassurance for the FY19 budget when that is being prepared also. You have the detail of the local receipts on a different sheet there. Our largest one is motor vehicle excise tax. The first large commitment, I think people just got their motor vehicle excise tax bills in the mail. Very similar to where we were last year at this time. I believe it was about $7,000 higher this fiscal year as opposed to last fiscal year. If we can maintain that same level of revenue for FY18 as we did for 17, we'll be, again, remain in a very good position, because the FY18 amounts that we had estimated were far lower than their actual on the 17 actuals, mainly because they didn't know where the market was going when it came to purchasing of new vehicles, because there's been such strong sales data over the last couple of years there. At some point in time, it's going to start to decline. The free cash balance at this point in time going into the town meeting is $572,000, and our operational stabilization fund roughly at this point in time is $3.3 million. Pretty good position to be in this late in the fiscal year. Ambulance revenues are running similar to where they were last year. Last year we collected nearly $700,000 in ambulance revenue. I'm anticipating that we're going to surpass that $700,000 mark this year. That would be about $55,000 over budget, and that would go far in making that first reimbursement back to the general fund, where we had to loan it. We had to loan for the ambulance $130,000 So that would be the first payment back to the town's general fund, which is kind of right on schedule where we thought we were going to be. Water and sewer, it was a rainy year, or a rainy fall more than anything else, this last fall as opposed to the fall before. I'm anticipating that the water revenues are probably going to be short tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, I will not know exactly probably until early part of March when the meters are to be read next week, quite honestly, and we'll have that data available in a week or two exactly what that commitment is going to be. But I would anticipate falling a little bit short on the water side. The sewer revenues are more stable, and I would anticipate that the sewer revenues are going to be right on target, maybe a little bit above of the estimate. So it's still looking pretty good in those two areas. The water retained earnings at this point in time is a little over $500,000. The sewer retained earnings at this point in time are a little over $900,000. The solid waste recycling enterprise revenues are a little bit ahead of pace from looking at a year ago, but also the increases that were recently passed for the permits and some of the other disposal fees, that will add about $10,000 to $15,000. That was not included originally when the FY18 budget numbers were presented. So that will be a boost towards the end of the year that I would anticipate we fully meet that revenue goal for FY18, and it will also help with the FY19 numbers. The solid waste retained earnings at this point in time is $43,000. Again, as I said, the January estimated receipt report was done separately, and there's some other comments regarding some of the estimated receipts on the very bottom of that page. General fund expenditures are running fairly tight, a little bit tighter than I would like them to be, but that's just the way the budgeting has been lately. Certainly, we're going to be needing a annual town meeting warrant article for the snow and ice removal. I would anticipate that's going to be about $250,000, which is, I don't want to say it's historically where it's been over the last couple of years, but we are very much over, and we will continue to be over.
Well,
We're
wait a
at
second.
62.
We're at 62 with a budget of 100. And we're going to go $250,000 over?
Yeah, I have it that we are, at the end of January, snow and ice accounting authority expenditures exceeded the budget by $91,000. We've already expended $191,000.
That's not,
We just saw 62,000. We just got this report.
Again, I'll have to go back and look at where the difference is. I know there's salt and sand cost involved in there.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And I know there's
Maybe
other
we-
costs too, not only.
We might need a new
I think there's some
report.
equipment that was purchased that isn't
Yeah,
reflected.
again, this is only overtime, so I'm reporting on all the expenditures.
Oh, we want to see
Oh,
all
that's
the
only overtime?
Expenditures.
That's only overtime that you hit that 62,000.
Oh.
That's not the full report.
that wasn't,
Oh,
that
yeah.
wasn't what was asked. Okay.
So can we get the report?
Yeah, I can get you the report. Again, I have it at the end
My
of
apologies.
January, we're 191,000. I think the request was for overtime and snow and ice.
Oh, it was?
I think it was. It wasn't a request for the full-blown snow and ice budget. I don't believe it was. Anyway, we can get that updated for the next meeting also.
Okay.
But I personally have at the end of January through the Munis system that had expended $191,000, which would be $91,000 over budget. That's why I'm saying we could potentially be as high as $250,000 by the end of the fiscal year, given we have another at least six weeks, according to the
According to the punk study.
right. We are expecting a minor event on Wednesday. The weekend event is expected
No,
to
it's
be
a
rain.
minor event.
It's 7-8
It's
interest.
3 to 6, and then there's north and west of here is 6 to 12. So depending on
Three
what
to
that
six. We're
line,
New Englanders.
depending on what that line does, it could get worse or
Well.
do nothing like it did last time.
So you mentioned equipment was purchased. What equipment was purchased?
Or serviced, the plows or
Certainly.
sanders and things like that.
Oh, so it was just serviced, it wasn't purchased?
I know that there were blades purchased.
Yeah, plow blades and things like that.
Plus, they said 150K in salt, right?
Yeah.
There's another $150,000 encumbered, which is set aside on a salt contract. It's not purchased yet,
Oh,
but
it's
it's
not
set
purchased.
aside.
Oh, okay.
And whether we expend that fully or not is going to be depending on the weather situations. The employee benefits, liability insurance amounts are running tight, which is, again, I think is where we want them to be. We don't like to see large turnbacks there. The fire overtime is ahead of a 7/12 budget at this point in time. The fire department budget, he's been working basically 3 firefighters down all year with illnesses, whether they're related to injury on duty or not. He's had 3 guys out. One of them just recently was retired, so we'll be able to fill that slot. We also have according to the FY18 budget, we had budgeted another firefighter. That firefighter will come on board in April. And the other 2 retirements are pending and going through. So hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, he will have close to a full complement of employees. And his overtime, hopefully, again, would diminish with that full complement. But again, right now, as I said, he's been working the fiscal year, basically 3 guys down. So there has been a lot of overtime that has been expended. He's also, he's had a couple house fires, a couple of big I-91 accidents that they've had to deploy a lot of equipment and manpower down. Some of that will be reimbursed. He is starting to go out and he's starting to bill some companies for the times that they're going out on 91 and in other areas that he can actually get some money back from the insurance company, so he's beginning to do that. I think he basically just got a check for like $3,000 for one minor incident that they had to deploy some extra equipment and men, so that will again soften some of that also.
Paul, a quick question. When any department, like police and fire probably, is down a person, and somebody fills in their shift, the fill-in person is paid entirely out of the overtime budget.
Correct.
But isn't there some moderate amount of straight pay that doesn't get paid, or because they're paid out through sick leave, it still shows up?
It all depends on why the person is out. If a person is out simply on a non-work related injury, you are going to have one employee who's going to get paid their salary, and then you're going to have one employee who's taking that slot on an overtime basis. We do have insurance for IODs, injury on duties, for police and fire. So if you do have an employee who's out injury on duty, that employee is going to get paid their regular wages. We will get reimbursed a dollar amount for that employee who is out, but so that'll soften some of it, but there'll still be an employee who had to come back in on the overtime.
Does the reimbursement show up in that account, or does it show up in some other account?
No, it would show up as a net.
Oh, okay.
It'd be an offset. As long as it comes in within the same fiscal year, it shows as an offset to that. So,
Incidentally, DPW overtime is also running high because of similar, they've had vacancies, some attrition, some retirements, and we've had a difficult time filling positions.
Right. The DPW will be reimbursed, I don't know the exact amount, but they will get probably a hefty check from the insurance carrier for all the extra work they had to do over at Wolf Swamp with that, with the water pipe break, or the heater system break there. So some of that will offset, and they're not really, though that check has not been received yet, so it's not an offset, but overall they are, because of those absences, they are pretty hefty going into their budget of the overtime. Water, sewer, solid waste, recycling enterprise funds for FY18 are relatively on target. I don't anticipate there are any major needs there for the rest of the fiscal year unless something catastrophic happens. The FY19 budget, as I mentioned here, is work in progress. The town manager and myself have been had a couple meetings with Superintendent O'Shea and Tom Mazza regarding the school budget, even prior to when it was presented to the school committee last week. Certainly the governor's budget, his proposed budget for state aid, has helped us. That number came in $300,000 higher than we had anticipated, which was simply remarkable, we thought. We had anticipated roughly a 2% increase, which would have been about a little over $100,000, but the actual amount turned out to be $422,000. So that was a big, or was a major part in getting that deficit that was projected back in October, the near $600,000, chopped it off quite a bit for us. We will be instituting the first stormwater fee with the water and sewer billing that goes out in next September. That estimated income is $200,000. I think folks knew that. We set the rates a couple weeks ago. That was built into the budget. The biggest unknown at this point in time, the school budget has not been formally approved by the school committee. The current number that has been proposed by administration is very workable for Stephen and I in the budget. So we're hoping it kind of remains in that area. And then lastly, the biggest piece after that is the health insurance rates that Scantic Valley will vote on, I believe, the 22nd of February. There is still, originally I had put in for, originally it was budgeted at 7.5%. Financial information has come back favorably from Scantic Valley thus far this fiscal year. Excuse me, I'm just hoping for if health insurance rates even increase, I'm hoping for that. I'm almost fairly confident that they'll be less than 5%. There was talk at the last Scantic Valley meeting that they'd be far less than that, so kind of keeping my fingers crossed. That budget is due to you folks for your first meeting in March. You have it March 1st. Your first meeting being the 5th of March. You'll have that full documentation in front of you. And again, I think with the numbers that we have done for the budget, there should not be any service level decreases whatsoever for that FY19 budget also, which was, again, fairly positive also. And potentially meeting some of the, how do we address the Prop 2.5 increase? Might be able to pull something less than the 2.5% off there also.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Yes, Marie?
We're going to have the school committee present their budget this year?
We could have them,
I don't think it's been adopted by the committee yet.
Yeah, it's not
They just had their
adopted till the
public hearing.
14th.
Yeah. Don't we usually have the superintendent come talk about it?
After they adopt it, they present it to us, I think after you received, even after March 1st.
It's usually in February sometime.
Right.
Yeah.
So
They may, if they're done by the 14th, we could put them on the agenda for the 20th.
Right. But again, right now it's in the hands of the committee. They had their public hearing. I don't know what the committee, I don't know what the committee's going to do, obviously.
But you've been able to work together and coordinate
Absolutely. Again, the number that they have as a recommendation from the administration is basically right in an area that, I don't want to say within reason, but it's basically a 2% increase. They've had to make some adjustments here and there and had some favorable things happen. But it's a number that is going to work fairly well on what we have available at this point in time.
Thank you.
I just want to bring up one other thing where, we had the Council on Aging make their proposal today. We'd probably be going out to bond for the DPW project sometime in the late spring. With that DPW project, we've always tried to manage the effect of the debt exclusion on the tax rate. And given that, and the Council on Aging potentially following very closely behind and potentially a middle school somewhere down the line, what I'd really like to have is some input from this group and how we want to schedule or how we want to make that debt service schedule look when we have an opportunity to massage it and make it work with the debt. Do we pay a lot of it up front? Do we pay it on a level service? So what I'd like to do for the next meeting or the meeting shortly thereafter that is give you some information of where our current excludable debt is and how can we manage that tax rate. So I just have your input before we go any further. I've kind of worked with the last bond issue when we refinanced. I kind of did it all in the background by myself, and whether it was right or wrong, I never sought the input. And so, at this point in time, let's get the input up front as opposed to coming in and making a proposal and kind of having it done after the fact.
We did it after the fact on the high school, I think.
Well, at least with the high school, there was a group that had met and kind of set the tone of that. So, I mean, it's past history, but now we can move forward. And again, what I'll do is I will update our debt schedules and have a printout of the effect on the tax rate. It drops off in the year 2023 with Blueberry Hill and Wolf Swamp coming off there. There's a small drop in a couple of years. We have a small drainage project that's dropping. So how do we make that work? And trying to keep it, unfortunately, it's going to be on a steady incline. We know, I've always worked it. We don't like to see any spikes, either upwards or downwards. So that's where I'd like to seek your input in getting that debt schedule in place.
Okay, so yes, that's a good idea, look at payment plans. All right, well, that's good. If there's no other questions on that, I guess believe it or not, we maybe, well, you have subcommittee reports, any subcommittee?
Nothing for me.
No?
No, we're not ready.
Okay, so.
Oh, well, other than we're meeting,
We tried to meet once, and we're going to try to meet again.
Yeah.
Great, that's a,
And the Energy Task Force is, through the Mass Saves, as I told you before, is auditing actually now all the buildings in town. So we'll
Okay.
have a report on all the buildings
All
in
the
town.
town-owned buildings.
No, all the buildings, all the town,
So they're
all
gonna
the
be knocking on your
municipal
door, Columbia
buildings.
Gas, it's gonna be,
The school and the town buildings are all being audited,
school buildings are town buildings too.
yes.
okay, so we would need to have a motion for adjournment to move into executive session with,
Not to return to
and we
open.
would not be returning back?
Not to return to open.
Not to return to that, okay.
I'll move we adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session for the purposes of discussing the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health, rather than professional competence of an individual, or discuss the discipline or dismissal of complaints or charges against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual, and to meet with a mediator requiring potential litigation.
Oh, second?
Okay, let's take a roll call.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes?
Marie.
Yes.
Richard.
Okay, thank you for watching. Have a good evening.